Yes, we have to approve the agenda before we do anything else. So is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion. Okay. Second. You don't have to be able, you have to be able to speak to raise your hand. Anyone opposed to approving the agenda? No? Okay. Agenda is approved.
All right, tonight is a study session, so you all can sit back and relax. As far as meeting facilitation from here, we have some great folks lead. We're gonna lead two conversations tonight, all on the front side of our 2024 budget development. So first, Stacy Hoffman and Jackson Height are going to share information that's been developed really collaboratively with teammates from across the department about our fee policy. And then Mark Davison, probably with support from Jackson and Stacy again, is going to talk about our capital investment strategy. So both really exciting conversations for tonight. We don't have any action or direction. The intent is twofold. First, to really lay a solid foundation for the budget conversations to come in the coming months. One of Crab's roles is that you shall make a recommendation regarding expenditures from the permanent Parks and Recreation funds. That is one of your charter mandated roles. And then also you are asked to approve our operating budget submission. So as we have done as years in the past, we'll share with you major changes to the budget, get your input on that and pass those along as we discuss the budget. I'm going to pause for a minute to welcome. Is it Bernie? Do you go by Bernie? Welcome.
I'm sorry I'm late when I went to the wrong door a couple times.
That happens. All good. It's also hard that the building is locked, right? So that's just one of the functions of this hybrid world we're still in. When the meetings are able to be open to public attendance, then the building will be open and we won't have that hiccup to deal with. So we are diving right on in. As I told Anna, for our two new board members, feel free to start a list now of questions that you have that maybe are not germane to the conversation, but would be helpful. We'll cover those in our one-on-one. If you have questions that are germane to the conversation, feel free to dive in early and ask questions. For both presentations, the team will share with you if they would like questions during. We have opportunities for questions in both presentations as well. And so with that, if there's anything else, we'll start going. I'll just, for the fee policy conversation, what I want to just highlight is we sent some information for you to review in advance. For our existing board members, really this builds on at least a year of information. For Andrew or Bernie and Anna, it's really hard timing that our board members start right as we're diving into budget. It's one of the hardest parts of the learning curve for board members, and why I'm glad you're both. We have those one-on-one set up where we can talk about our funding overview and just the foundational information. So you also have some really great board members by your side. And I think both have been assigned a PRAB mentor. That's a PRAB designed program to support getting new board members up to speed. So definitely take advantage of your PRAB mentors. With that, what I wanted to point out with the fee policy and is in that background information is tonight's information. And we are going to get some input on the fee policy. I want to remind you that this is just a part of the process. There's more to come with input from city council, input from the community, input from our teammates. A key step is that we too intend to run this whole policy through our racial equity instrument and consult with our community connectors to ensure that we are considering how any fee increases will have unintended consequences and how do we make sure to mitigate those through strong financial aid and other programs. We don't want to be creating financial barriers while we achieve financial sustainability. So I wanted to point that out. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jackson and Stacy. Rather than do intros as we go, and because we have new members, let's do a round of introductions so that you know who's talking as they talk, and then we won't have two introductions every time. That works. So I'm Allie Rhodes. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation, and I'm thrilled that you're out here and really grateful for your brains.
And I'm Scott Schuttenberg. I'm the Deputy Director. I'm also thrilled to have you guys on the board.
Brian Beery, I'm one of the Senior Recreation Managers. I'm here for some moral support with the fee policy because I was strongly involved in the 2019 updates to the recreation facility fees and some of our health equity and access work.
Mark Davison, the Planning Manager.
Stacy Hausman, I am in Business Services and Budget.
Jackson Height, Business Services Manager. A lot of budget, a lot of numbers, a lot of stuff.
Elliot Hood, PRAB member.
Anna Seeger, new PRAB member.
Welcome. Chuck Brock, the Vice Chair.
Andrew Bernstein, I was late, sorry.
Did you go by Bernie?
I go by Bernie, but I will answer to Andrew.
Okay, great.
Only when we're mad at you.
Jason under.
Rosa Kogel, and I've been in contact with both of you, executive assistant.
She makes everything work. Very important person. Very important. And thank you for the food.
Yes.
There is some, these overs back here in the sandwich.
All right, thank you, Scott, for starting the introductions. You all know why we're here. We're going to talk about my pressure's not working. We're going to talk about the fee policy for the first hour and 20 minutes tonight, before transitioning over to the capital investment strategy. So about an hour and a half for this conversation. We really tried to condense it down. We did give you some background slides to review in advance of this meeting, and really want to have this as conversational, so please ask questions throughout. Before we get started, were there any questions on the background material that we sent you? A lot of it was repeat information for the new crowd members joining us. I know that it's a lot. There's a lot of acronyms, not the most exciting topic, but very important given the transparency and just foundation that the budget gives the department to operate.
I think one of you at the last meeting in our March meeting had mentioned this is a lot of dense information, right? And I have to kind of remember that. So please, if you do have questions along the way, ask them as we go along. So we want it to be interactive and engaging for you.
Can you elaborate real briefly on the relationship between the capital improvement strategy and the capital improvement plan? Capital investment strategy.
Yes.
That's actually going to be covered during Mark's presentation. So if you don't mind holding that conversation, there's a slide on just that.
Slide. Any other questions before we get started?
All right, so in developing the department's fee policy, the department will follow the same approach as the master plan update. So we want to make sure that we engage the community. We want to make sure that we are open and collaborative, and we're definitely looking for equitable outcome. And as Sally mentioned, we're looking to set up those community connectors. We are doing research, so we'll use the 2022 master plan update and those outcomes as kind of a benchmark for us to follow. And we are reviewing national and regional trends. So far, we've reached out to about 14 municipal agencies in the area and across a few other states to kind of see what their fee policies look like, what their cost recovery looks like. So we are in the process of gathering all of that data to share out. And we definitely want to make sure that we engage BPR and city staff. So we want this process to be very collaborative. And everything will work in line with our policy guidance. So for citywide, we will follow the SER framework, which is the Sustainability, Equity, and Resilience framework. And that is up on the top of that graphic there. So acronym number 1, explained hopefully, the racial equity tool. And then also, as I mentioned, the master plan update. We'll be looking for feedback from the PRAB. We will be bringing some questions and participating in the city council study session on May 11th, just to make sure that they are aware of what we are doing and the work that we're doing as a department. And we're hoping that approval will be later in 2023, and this will all align in with the 2024 budget development. As we establish the fee policy, our key master plan goals and initiatives will provide guidance so that we'll be in alignment with our community values. And what we will be looking to do is reducing barriers, increasing access, and providing programming that is most important to the community. But we also want to make sure that we have the resources to provide that. I'm just going to pause until that. Sorry, people are trying to get in. Sorry. Okay, let's start that. We want to make sure that we align the community expectations with available resources, right? So we need to be financially sustainable as we're working through this process. The master plan has identified a funding gap for recreation, and the development of the fee policy is one strategy to help reduce that gap. And we need to stay viable in the community. We constantly need to be thinking about process improvement and improving our internal processes. This will help us establish a fee policy to set recreation on a sustainable path forward. And we're really looking at two objectives with that. We want the fee policy to have direction and structure, and we also want to hit cost recovery targets. So we're looking to create one document that is transparent, consistent, and simplified. We want our staff to be able to use this document. And we also want the staff to be able to explain what that is to our community. And we want the community to be able to digest it and understand where the department stands on our fees. This will all also fall under our subsidy levels, which will be prioritized based on our level of subsidy received, the classification of our services. That community feedback is going to be so important through this whole process. And we want to make sure that the services we are providing have the greatest community benefit. So last month, we did bring you a list of program types, and we have program types that have a set fee policy and also program types that do not have a set fee policy. So the ones up on this slide right now are program types with a set fee policy. We have facility access, the golf course, and recreation services. And that does give you some examples of some of the programs that would fall underneath that. We do have a frequency of review, which Jackson had gone over in the last meeting. Our benefit level or program category would fall under community, recreation, or exclusive. And then we do have a firm policy direction on when that next update. When we did review this list and in between preparing for the study session, we did realize that open access was missing from this. And open access really is how people access our parks, our playgrounds, the skate park, our pathways, right? There's usually no cost. It's of the greatest community benefit, but we did want to put this to make sure that that was explained and included in the fee policy. We also had identified some program types without a set policy, and that included rentals and access, commercial use, contracted programming. We updated the name actually last week. It had been introduced as facilitated programming. So that would be things that the department may contract with, such as the Goats and Gardens Camp or Gonzo Tennis, but we felt like contracted programming just better described those programs. And then special events was added to this list as the second one for the ad. That one was missing, and that would encompass things like the Halloween drive-in, the Sweetheart Dance, and special events that the department does put on for the community. The special events may fall under community, recreation, or exclusive. None of these do have a policy, and we're looking to develop that policy in Q3 and Q4. So with that, we'd like just to open it up for discussion of program types. So we've identified the 9 program types that are listed up there. And we are wondering if the PREB agrees that we've identified the identified program types are accurate.
And I guess I would say this is the area where we would like to be challenged as staff of think of an example that may not fit into one of these categories. We've done it with ourselves. We've done it with peers across the department and believe we have a justifiable answer to everything, but would love to hear from you just to make sure that we did capture everything correctly.
Go ahead. I was just like something like rowing has come up. Where would that fit in? Is that a rental and access or contracted programming? What do you pick up?
Yeah, so if it is, it could actually fall in a couple different categories, right? So if someone was just accessing the reservoir, it would just be facility access. If they were actually a part of a user group, right, and they were renting out space, that would fall under our rentals and access. Maybe even go a little bit into commercial use. So it really just depends on the program type and what is the user group, what is the end goal or end purpose of that.
Where the cemeteries fit.
Cemetery?
Cemetery is going to be more so under OPS. There is a portion of plots that are for sale, so great question. I would say that we would probably throw that into something associated with commercial use or rentals and access. We have something that's resale goods for sale. And that would be the most accurate definition. What we see with resale and goods for sale is the cost recovery targets on that are just so broad. An example that constantly comes up is a diaper at a rec center. You really just want to cover the cost. So people who are there can swim with their kids. Whereas something like a fruity bar, we don't want to sell it just at a break even. There is some benefit associated with that. Something like a walk or we have relatively few SKU items, so it's hard to come up with examples here. There are just various levels of cost recovery associated with that.
About high school swim team use of recreation centers?
Currently, that's under rentals and access. So you're essentially renting a lane line for an extended period of time. We also do have the joint use agreement where there is overlap. Use agreement.
And why do you separate out the golf course from other facilities?
In a lot of agencies, golf courses are actually treated as their own enterprise fund, given the exclusivity associated with it. The golf course doesn't really completely align with facility access because there is a sense of exclusive use for the type of programming and individual contributions that are going on. And just generally speaking, it's very hard to do a cost comparison or market study for a broad cross-section of different facilities when we do have such a specialized use with the golf course.
And facility access was defined in more of an entrance. So if you're entering the reservoir, one of the outdoor pools, or one of our recreation centers, right, you would pay that entrance fee as a drop-in or maybe a membership pass. With the golf course, you could just be going there to utilize the range or maybe booked, 8 or 9 holes. So it's structured a little different.
But to your point, though, I do think that some of our facilities may have multiple different program types within that facility. So if you look at a recreation center, you have the facility access to get inside the center itself. If you're doing a birthday party, that may fall under rentals and access. You are renting a space or renting a room. And then a drop-in fitness class would be a recreation service that you're accessing at that facility. Yes.
What about like the porta potties that are set up in different locations? Or just general bathroom?
General bathrooms would typically fall under open access. Those are going to be accessible during business hours. We're not going to charge a fee to access a restroom.
And I guess they're part of the other facilities they're embedded in, right?
Correct.
Like for a special event, you would have porta potties that would be under special events.
Yes. These are great questions.
But then a special event, you would want to be recovering costs on your porta potties.
Yes, but not separately from the special event though.
You can see where it gets complicated.
Well, we were challenged to poke holes in it, so we're trying.
Yeah.
Any other?
Maybe it's just the term exclusive with the golf course, but is there, it does kind of.
Within the golf course, once again, you are going to see the different types of facilities. We do offer just community recreation with YSI and Expand. The First Tee program provides access to youth. The new clubhouse, when that's complete, that will be treated more as a commercial use for that facility. You have tournaments, which could fall into a variety of categories, but probably the recreation services. How are we looking at cost recovery for tournaments that are taking place?
So is it, the reservoir seems to also fit, so how do you, if you could put them in a separate category, just the two of them, just seemed like, I mean, more just the question because, like golf is so exclusive anyway, and then like separate line items, thinking more. So this is not. I think everyone is this, but I think, like you could say the reservoir and the golf course are the same type of facility, right? There's similar programming, there's facility right now.
I think we see that with all of our facilities. If you look at a pool, you have the general recreation, you have swim lessons, you have lane rentals. So you have a variety of categories across all facilities. The reservoir is somewhat unique because it is free access for several months of the year, twilight fee a portion of the year, and then full services when we are providing lifeguarding, full hours of operation, boat patrol, et cetera. Any other questions, comments?
Any other types of activities?
So tennis.
Tennis lessons, yeah.
So we contract with someone that provides tennis and it's a revenue share. So registration is done through our management software system. The lessons are provided by that contracted instructor and then it's a revenue split. So that's where we would get a contracted programming. So those usually do have a defined revenue split and those are set up ahead of time and the department just has several of those, so.
Good for kids. Sure. So I think another point, just to clarify with all of you, is we have very broad definitions right now. When the final policy comes back for formal approval, we will have very tight definitions that clarifies. So a member of the public doesn't have that question of which category do I fall within based on what I'm doing. What we see with other agencies is some of them will list out every type of program that they offer for each of these categories to give specific examples. I think that there are pros and cons associated with that. So our intention is to focus more on the definition and examples of types of programming, given programming does change at a somewhat frequent basis. Yeah, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you for poking holes here. All right, I know that we reviewed this last week or 2 weeks ago. We do have program categorization that comes directly from the master plan. We have community, recreation, and exclusive. Communities on the far left, and that really focuses on taxes generally paid for it. It provides the greatest community good. The master plan direction is very clear. It's intended for people with low incomes, people with disabilities, and older adults. On the far right-hand side, you have exclusive activities. These are tied to individuals or user groups with limited community benefit. So very exclusive in access. And typically user fees pay for this because it is an individual benefiting from it. In the middle, you have recreation. Recreation is a broad cross-section, and there is some combination of taxes and user fees that pay for this. It really just depends on the categorization and cost recovery targets that we currently have under the Recreation Priority Index. So within this, on the right-hand side, you do have the community, recreation, and exclusive, but within all three categories, we do feel as if there's various service levels ranging from beginner to intermediate to advanced. And it's important to think about that life cycle of an activity and how you go about becoming an experienced person in any sort of sport. So we'll pick on gymnastics today as a perfect example. A toddler may enroll in beginner gymnastics. After a few years in beginner gymnastics, you'll move up to the intermediate category. And then ultimately, we do have the Go Flyers program, which is considered an advanced or private form of recreation. So across our portfolio of services that we do provide, there are various different types program benefit levels. And within that, we do think that there are various cost recovery targets associated with that based on the types of activities you're trying to incur. A common example would be swim lessons. As a beginner, there's a huge community benefit to making sure that every child in this community can swim. So something like that, we typically wouldn't reach full cost recovery because we are trying to make sure that there are long-term benefits associated with teaching a child to swim. Something like gymnastics, beginner gymnastics, that may be closer to full cost recovery just because it is an individual activity in a group setting where we are trying to cover our full costs for providing that service. So I just wanted to call out that difference that even though we have community recreation and exclusive, it kind of ranges from a community benefit to an individual benefit. There is another layer within this where we are looking at beginner to advanced. And there are likely different cost recovery targets as we're looking at that grid, 3D model, whatever you want to call it. So we are going to look at this as part of the conversation tonight. I know that we can get confused with this and we work in this all day, every day. Are there any questions about our categorization and types of services we are offering?
Could you tell me when the recreation priority index is applied? Is it strictly to recreation activities or is it applied more broadly?
Currently, it's primarily registered activities. The Recreation Priority Index was last updated in 2016. We do have that tool, which we can apply to everything. What we found is as you're applying it to facility access, it's not an apples to apples comparison, and it doesn't really provide a huge benefit. But within our registered programs, it is a very consistent way to evaluate our programs, but there is some discrepancy within the various programmers. Stacy and I could fill out the RPI and have slightly different results.
For our new members, could you give a really quick description of what the RPI is?
Yep. Recreation Priority Index, it looks at the broad overview of a program. Is it replicable? Who does it benefit? How many people does it serve? When is it offered? There's about 10 different categorizations within the tools, and it's a scorecard based that provides a score that basically informs us of what the cost recovery target should be for that program.
So it's a semi-quantitative measure, basically, or a quantitative measure.
Correct.
The community benefit. Yep. From that activity.
Correct.
That's a model that we are looking to simplify, just so that it is easier for staff to use and get more consistent results. So as we do this whole process.
Is that the practice that's kind of used broadly by recreation departments?
Very much so. This was a key recommendation from the 2014 master plan. It was implemented in 2015, revised in 2016. You see a similar tool or scorecard used across every other rec department in the country.
Thank
The scorecard, I think what Jackson is talking about as far as the categorization is very common. To my knowledge, the objective scoring of programs is not very common. We've presented at it nationally. It was it's been a key recommendation for several years. When we presented it at the national conference, and granted this was 5 years ago, and I know you've been doing research, so correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of the feedback we heard from folks was this is way too sophisticated for us. That would never fly in our community or our organization. And I don't know if you're seeing the scorecard approach now more and more.
I would say a third of the agencies we surveyed now have a scorecard in place.
That's awesome. That's fascinating. So that's a change in the last 5 years.
It seems like there's a real advantage to having a quantitative number that you can apply to it because it helps. If there's criticism or conflict, it really helps mitigate that. Like you can say, well, the reason you're not getting access to the small fields because the group has a higher score and here's why they have a higher score. That seems to be a real benefit.
It is. The challenge for using it, things that we don't provide is it's based upon the design and the delivery of the program. So what health outcomes are you trying to achieve? What populations are you reaching? And then did you achieve that? How did you perform? We can control none of that for so many, like for rentals and access or a basket weaving program, for example. And so that's why the RPI has been limited to VPR services.
Is there any way for a group to appeal or push back on their score?
Well, that's what we don't use it on groups, right? We use it on BPR programs. So if you're talking about rowing, the current policy is that user groups pay full cost recovery, and certainly they can push back on that policy. I think we've seen a lot of those conversations and questions, and that's why we're trying to adopt a formal policy. So it's really clear that it's consistent. This is across the system. Adult user groups pay full cost recovery of direct costs.
I think what you see for services we don't deliver is what category do they fall into between community, recreation, and exclusive. Staff has a very tight interpretation of how we categorize these. Some people may see that there are greater community benefits that staff isn't seeing. So I think you all have heard that comparison for a handful of items where we may view something as very exclusive and it could be viewed by another party as community oriented.
I guess to that question, Elliot, can you challenge, let's say gymnastics is cut at the expense of something else, and could gymnastics advocates say like, hey, we would like to talk to you all more and understand how you rank us and how you determine that? I mean, is there I don't know that we know that answer.
Are you talking about like an internal to us BPR program?
Yeah,
So, those are our teammates, and so these are the policies and these are how they apply, right? And so they actually do the scoring. I think what you're asking, Jason, is how do people appeal the fees that we set, right? And I mean, the reality is nobody.
Not just, well, yeah, I guess.
yeah, okay.
Right, everybody wants everything for free. And most people highly value whatever their form of recreation is, whether it's pottery or gymnastics or rowing or whatever it might be. And we agree, we're passionate about all of it. But with infinite resources, we'd make it all free too. But it can't be. And so there does have to be categorization and prioritization. And so all the groups, that's the intent of the fee policy. So we're saying out loud and upfront, intermediate programs will be priced here. Beginner programs have more community benefit. They're going to be priced here. If you are an exclusive, highly individual thing, I don't care if it's Pilates or gymnastics or, whatever that thing is, the benefit is almost exclusively to the individual, even though you value it highly and we're not going to subsidize it. And so I think what you're asking is how do people protest the fee policy? And our hope is that with having an approved fee policy, it's really clear and not everybody's going to like it. I can tell you that now, right? Our goal is not a policy everybody likes. Our goal is a policy that is fairly applied, that upholds our commitments to equity and to access, and that hopefully our policymakers can support, because that'll make it a lot easier for us to uphold the policy.
And then just one more thing to add just on that is that, we do offer financial assistance to the community. So if there is a financial barrier and they do qualify for assistance and they are a Boulder resident, we do have our Play Pass program for youth that we work with through the Play Foundation. And then the department does offer financial assistance to help reduce some of those barriers as well. So we're not shutting people out.
So real quick on that, I know this is entirely about fees. I think my question was probably larger than fees, and I don't want to get into that. This is specific to that. But what made me ask that was because it seems like that's a metric that's used beyond fees, the RPI. Is that true? Like just in terms of prioritization of offerings, maybe not just the cost, but like what is offered. And so this is a whole separate conversation. I don't want to beat us down there, but I think that was prompted that because it seems like it's a metric not just used for fees, but in determining overall priorities of how many different classes this type of sport do we offer versus this one. Does that make sense?
Some of it does come down to scheduling and availability as well as just the space. Reality is we have 3 recreation centers. There's a finite amount of space. You can only have one user group in a space at a time. So that is a tool that is somewhat applied to space currently. Our course catalog as far as what gets priority. So.
Okay.
I don't know where I'm going with that, but.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, to kind of get us off track. That was my question. So.
Thank you. These are great questions. So this is an example as far as how our programs currently are structured. We have the community, recreation, and exclusive. On the top, we do have the program categorization as far as those 9 definitions you had agreed to, the addition of resale items. And then on the bottom, we have examples of our types of programs. This is similar to what other agencies do, that they'll list out 10, 15 examples for each category. But this line along the middle really shows what the current cost recovery target is for each of these types of programs. Generally speaking, our beginner is more so on the lower cost recovery, and then it gets to a higher cost recovery, the more exclusive or advanced you become. So we just wanted to provide this as an example. We have several programs up here. We know that everyone participates in Boulder Parks and Recreation's programming differently. So hopefully there's an example that speaks to you, a friend or a family member, as far as how we view that. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question about this when I was looking at it, about why is lifeguard training in the exclusive category? It seems to me that would be more of a community benefit to have a large supply of lifeguards to work in.
I think there's 2 ways to look at this. Lifeguard training for our staff is very much community focused. Lifeguarding for other agencies, yes, there is still a community benefit, but it is considered exclusive programming. We aren't going to not get full cost recovery for that because it is a advanced certification that does take time and resources away from delivering our programming.
And so just to clarify, right now, our lifeguard training for City of Boulder employees fully free. We actually even pay for their time in the class if they're hired at the start of it. So this is one that when it's in-house training, it's free. When it's offered as a service, like you are going to work in Michigan for the summer and want to get trained here in Boulder before you go, we would pay full cost for that or charge full cost.
Okay, this is our second of 3 or 4 discussion points. Does the PREB agree that the staff identified benefit levels or service category correctly align with the program type? And the program type, we have those 9 that you had agreed to earlier. We will be adding in the resale items. We have the examples just as a reference point, and then the benefit level. As a reminder, community is the most broad, recreation is the middle category, that's a catch-all, and exclusive is very much focused on individuals.
What is Gladiator Fitness?
Gladiator Fitness is a camp that takes place at the
North Boulder Park.
Currently, go for it.
It's not a camp, it's an adult fitness plan. It's a boot camp style class. It's under commercial use because it's a private company that runs their programming in the park. And so they pay a fee for their use of the park because they're charging fees and they're using public space for private gain. So we call that commercial use. And it happens across our parks. The M&G Fine Park example that you were thinking of is the Renaissance camps. Yes, exactly. You see the people with their LARPing. Yeah.
Where's the voting? Is that in rentals and access?
Yeah, we have various types of boating. So if you look at Rocky Mountain Paddleboard, that is considered a contracted programming or a commercial use, given it's a lease of the building space. If you're talking about the CU rowers, that would fall under rentals and access. Or if you're a paddleboard permit holder, that would fall under facility access to access the reservoir, and then a recreation service to have the permit for your boat.
So, okay, so are you saying that a group like the Boulder CU rowing or the like Boulder Masters can have multiple benefit levels based on what they're doing, even though they're boating on the reservoir? I'm confused about that.
No, I gave you the broad examples for how anyone with a boat could access the Boulder Reservoir.
So if someone bought a boat permit for the season, right, that might fall under exclusive use, right? They're bringing their boat into the reservoir for the season, as opposed to boating, which could be a rental if it was a user group, like a CU or such.
There's so many blurry lines here between the different categories.
So let's talk about like CU rowing, right? They right now are rentals and access. We have offered for all of these groups, if you wanted to explore a contracted partnership where you're providing a program that is open to the community that they can register for, that you're adding in community benefits such as scholarshiping, such as other things that add community benefit, we're open to that. We just talked about Gonzo Tennis. That's a programming partnership. BAM actually used to be a City of Boulder program before it spun off for master swimming. Many agencies, that is an option that could happen for rowing. It wouldn't with CU, I suppose, but for Boulder community rowing, if they wanted to be a program that was facilitated and partnered with the city, that would be a different type of agreement that is not a rental, because there'd be a trade of services and benefit for the community. The other thing where I would add, it would be different is that some of these groups, Boulder Community Rowing or Colorado Junior Crew, they've offered a summer camp and they charge a fee for that. That is a different category of a service. And so part of our intent, Jackson mentioned earlier, the final fee policy is going to be very clear. We're going to run it through attorneys and copywriters and to make it the lines not feel so blurry, that it's really clear depending on what service you provide, how is it categorized? What then is the appropriate fee and subsidy level?
I look at things like the Halloween drive-in, which is a community benefit, the Sweetheart Dance is a recreation. But, I mean, how is a drive-in a community benefit to anyone other than the people that are going to see the movie? And the Sweetheart Dance only benefits the people that are going to the Sweetheart Dance.
Yeah.
But they're both fun things to do and they both sort of benefit the community in general. So how you draw those lines seems like it's gonna be hard to figure out how to parse some of these out.
Just a clarifying point, those categories, benefit levels on the right-hand side don't correspond directly. We're just saying all special events could fall somewhere between community and
Okay.
exclusive. So you are right that Halloween drive-in is very much exclusive. Something like Snow Much Fun or the Holiday Lights downtown.
Okay,
That is
it's not a one-to-one correspondence.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was something like, I don't know if this is necessarily a program, but something like rooming the boulder park for Nordic skiing in the wintertime. Does that fall on this chart somewhere?
That's a really great question. Where would you put that one?
I would say that is somewhere between open access and then a commercial use because we do have an MOU with.
The only, I'll point out, let me tell you how it works in practice, right? Is they don't pay anything for that. They pay insurance because it's open to the community and they don't charge fees. It's under open access. And so they have insurance and some costs. And we work on that because again, it's not closed to the public. It's actually a huge community benefit that's open to many people. So that one's under open access.
You said that to qualify for contracted programming, they have to propose some community benefit like scholarships, but there you have it as exclusive, your Gonzo tennis and the Goats and Gardens.
Within the contracted programming, we do different revenue splits between the partners. And part of that is based on how many individuals they are providing scholarships for. And whether or not we take registration or they take registration. There's definitely pros and cons either way. So generally speaking, 80% of users are following that under that exclusive. But there's
also some type of scholarship or community benefit, should it also be?
Correct. Currently, not every contracted programming partner offers a scholarship. It is why we didn't authorize it, but we will make note of that.
That it will be a requirement for all of the contracted programming that they have to do that, or that it'll just, there's two different categories.
Both and one, it should be both categories. And I believe we have steadily since 2017 been and actually, Brian, you might have a better answer on this. I think since 2017, as contracts have come up for renewal, we have added performance metrics around scholarshiping, financial aid access, satisfaction to all of them. I'm not sure where we are, if they're all there. You might have a better
Yeah,
update.
definitely the ones where we take the registration, they're on the same guide. I mean, you can use financial aid for those programs also.
This is exactly the type of feedback we're looking for, so thank you so much. So moving on to the next question, does the tribe agree that program types may fall into multiple benefit categories, depending upon the program skill target? And we kind of just hit that, but would love your thoughts here.
This is just a question on how this looks public facing. You said this is gonna be kind of run through attorneys and other folks. What will this look like when somebody comes to say hey, I have a proposal for a program at North Boulder Park, will you offer these are our categories, is that what it look like?
So I think 2 weeks ago, you all had asked for benchmarking. We have reached out to 14 agencies, as Stacy mentioned. The policies that we've seen are anywhere from 2 to 10 pages, and they vary in specificity. So consistent thing is they all have definitions, they all have target cost recovery numbers and types of programming that falls within that. So it does try to break it down very consistently. So anyone coming off the street can see how would this apply to me, as well as it's equally important for our staff to understand how to use this tool. Right now, you have to sift through 15 PRAB memos to find how anything works. The intention of this is to have one clear document that's very short and to the point, but it still captures all of the different variations and examples that you've thrown out.
On the fee policy, I'll note that like if you came to us and said, I want to run a program and I want to be a contract, I want to be a program contractor, we have a whole handbook for you. You want to run a special event, we have a whole handbook for you. You want to rent a facility, we have, so there's this is a fee policy, and then the how-to for doing some of these other things would be separate. So it's not, I don't think the fee policy isn't going to answer how do you design and deliver a contracted program, but it could point you in that direction.
Do the soccer field rentals have any requirements around scholarship and access or?
Not now. I think it's a great opportunity.
Okay, so a lot of head nods, so we'll continue on. So this slide is straight from the Ballard King report, financial analysis that was done as part of the 2022 master plan. This really shows how Boulder compares to other agencies for cost recovery at a national and Colorado specific level. Generally speaking, across the board, Boulder is higher than our peers in terms of the types of services we offer, our cost recovery, as well as the revenue per capita. Part of that is associated with the cost of doing business in Boulder. Part of it is associated with the level of services that this department provides. So on the left-hand side, we did throw out some very interesting stats that were highlighted in your memos as the master plan is being adopted. The revenue per capita is 12% higher. I think something that really stands out is our cost recovery level is 15% higher than other agencies. This is very indicative of every Parks and Recreation agency is funded slightly different, so it's not easy to do an apples to apples comparison. Some agencies have a dedicated fund to offer all of their recreation programming. Some receive a significantly larger general fund contribution. Others have dedicated taxes. So we do just want to say that it isn't an apples to apples comparison, and it's very difficult to say that Boulder should be exactly identical to Denver, Broomfield, Erie, Louisville, whatever other surrounding community. And then our expenses are higher. Part of this is based on the cost of doing business in Boulder. We do have more staff. We do have higher pay rates than other communities, and just our level of services are significantly higher based on the LOS diagram that you see in the master plan. So one of the asks 2 weeks ago was for us to do a benchmark analysis of how we compare it to other agencies, what other agencies' cost recovery targets and fee policies look like. We did reach out to all of our benchmark communities identified in the 2014 master plan, as well as all of the Colorado agencies that have received CAPRA accreditation in the last 5 years. This was intended to give us a broad cross sample of but from a national scale and a local scale. We only got responses back from a third of them with a actual fee policy. Many agencies said this is something we need to do. It's buried in multiple memos. It's very convoluted. We don't have anything to share with you right now. And what we found is that the funding models do vary across the board. And that's primarily based on how these agencies are funded. And then with that, cost recovery does vary, but you are seeing more and more agencies moving towards a cost recovery model where they are trying to identify what percentage of their revenue are they collecting and returning on expenses, just to be able to continue providing the services that they do provide. So this was really just intended as a benchmark. We do have specific policies we could share. We're still getting them every day. But we thought, generally speaking, this was high enough level to share with you that we have done our research.
Hey, Jackson, you mentioned CAPRA. Would you remind the board members?
Yes. I'm going to blank on the acronym, but it is the accrediting agency for Parks and Recreation agencies. It is something the department has committed to advancing towards in 2024. It really signifies that you're the best of the best because you have met all of these national standards for how you're doing your budgeting, how you're delivering your programming, your hiring process, all sorts of things.
So you'll hear us talk about CAPRA a lot, the Commission for the Accreditation of Parks and Recreation. It's a partnership with the American Academy of Parks and Recreation and the National Recreation and Park Association. A lot of the work, if you'll go back to, and Anna and Bernie, when we do our one-on-one, I'll talk to you about our work plan for the year. A lot of the work we're bringing forward helps us advance towards that accreditation and achieving those national standards.
How often is it renewed?
5 years. So that's one great benefit of CAPRA is once you are accredited, you're committed to this cycle of continuous improvement because you have to reaffirm the current standards and you have to achieve more. So of the 140-ish standards you have to achieve at initial accreditation, you only have to meet 115 of them. And as you renew every 5 years, you have to achieve more. Yeah.
Was there benchmarking around like usage levels and kind of financial aid or equity levels of different agencies?
For the portion on the right, this was all done by our consultant with the master plan, a sub-consultant with the master plan. Their data is really coming from NRPA, National Recreation and Parks Agencies, data set that's self-reported. There are very limited categories that equity really isn't a huge component. We do have a very high financial aid usage rate, and I think that we'll get to that in a slide or two. Places like other communities, I believe Denver it is right now, is doing free access to all older adults and teens and younger. That's something that it's hard for us to compete with without a dedicated funding source to provide those scholarships. So you can see in community specific that there is more financial aid being done. Brian, anything else to add from your perspective?
Yeah, that's good.
There's more being done in other communities or just in Denver?
I think it's going to be very community specific. Denver is one example. Generally speaking, there is some sort of cost recovery, and across Parks and Recreation, you do see subsidy or discount provided for age-based of seniors and youth. But that's really as far as the comparison level we do.
Would it be possible to put numbers on that?
For us, or as you mean to compare with others?
To compare with-
We have our numbers.
Gotta compare with others.
I'm going to reach out to the national agency because here's what I know is equity is one of their pillars and they are doing incredible work to align it with the work. I'm going to give an example that folks might be familiar with recently who attend their conference. If you want to present a session, you had to talk about how you were going to address equity, talk about how your panel, if it was a panel, was representing equity. Like I've not seen that in any other conference. So they're getting there. It's not in the park metrics, and I think it should be. And so I'll send an email to their policy advisor tomorrow because I think they'd love that input. And it could be that. And as far as for individual agencies around us, we could gather that through CPRA, our state agency.
I think if there's specific communities you're interested in knowing how we compare to, it would be helpful to have.
We would do our benchmarks. That's what would make sense, right? So our benchmark communities are selected because they're similar in size or they're high performing agencies. We have 6 here in Colorado and then 6 across the country for similar size, high performance in a university town. So similarity. So we have 12 official benchmarks. We could ask them for financial aid information. I also think we should dive back into the master plan benchmarking, because we might have asked some of that, but this is something we can follow up with you on.
Just out of curiosity, what are the 6 benchmarks in Colorado?
Westminster, Foothills, South Suburban, Fort Collins. That's 4. Longmont, 5. I say Westminster.
Yeah.
Westminster.
That's okay. I just wanted.
Yeah, we don't, and I'll tell you, when we set prices, we look locally and in the county, but for benchmarking and around policy setting, we tend to look at those agencies because they're more similar in size. And I guess I just also want to add is that that's something we can follow up on. I can't promise it. I just wanted to, this team is doing incredible work on top of budget development. Some of this we're not going to have for these conversations. There'll be follow-ups we get to as time permits. I saw you both write that down. I was like, oh man, we just gave them more work. So I think that is an excellent question, one we will follow up on, but it might take us some time.
Seems like a useful metric.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think it would help us. One of the, as we develop the budget, you're gonna hear about this more. We intend to ask for more funding for financial aid. I think benchmarking could help.
This slide really goes over our current cost recovery strategy. Most of it's based on the 2014 master plan and then the 2015 service design and delivery, which inform the RPI. So currently, we base our cost recovery on the service benefit factors, the RPI, and then we do have this cost recovery target within the RPI. As you can see, there is a whole lot of different ranges that are rather tight. And there is some overlap between how these various cost recovery targets exist, as well as just differences that we're seeing with current best practices with cost recovery. So the real purpose behind the fee policy objective is to simplify the service delivery model to calculate our costs. Right now, we could look at all sorts of different metrics associated with the cost of delivering a program, both direct and indirect costs, cost of the space, who's benefiting, the type of subsidy provided, et cetera. But we recognize that this chart is really 7, 8 years old at this point, and we are looking at updating our current cost recovery based on current practices and trends that we've observed with restoring services over COVID. So within this, we have broken down our current cost recovery targets by the different program types. We have community, recreation, and exclusive again. We're actually using the subsidy rate here. Subsidy rate can just be considered the discount rate. So a subsidy rate of 100% to 80% means that we're probably only collecting 20% of the cost to deliver that service. And these are the services that are really identified as being a broad community benefit. So there typically wouldn't be a high level of cost recovery associated with this. Within recreation, right now, we have a subsidy rate of 10 to 79%. As we're talking about cost recovery, that is just a very broad range. And we have programs all over the place that it is very hard to tell our staff and programmers what their cost recovery target should be for a program when you do have a range that is so broad. As well as the fact that our general fund subsidy that we receive on an annual basis has remained relatively flat despite costs going up. So having a consistently lower subsidy rate does mean that we are either offering less programming within the recreation and community, or we're offering more exclusive programming to capture revenue to pay for other service areas. And then within exclusive, the current subsidy rate is 10%, so a 90% cost recovery. We've already gone over the exclusive aspect. What is interesting, we have seen with other agencies is for exclusive programming, you can see a cost recovery rate of anywhere from 90% to well over 200%, depending on the type. So some agencies choose to use some exclusive programming to help fund some of their community benefit programming. And I think that the master plan direction started hinting at moving in that direction, but we don't have enough clear policy guidance that is part of the reason why we're here with you tonight. So
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Two questions, actually. What is Expand?
Expand is our program that serves people with disabilities.
And then do adult sport leagues have any financial aid or scholarships?
That's a really good question. I'll have to follow up on that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I think
Typically it's funny, so teams pay a team fee. And so in my experience as both a former coordinator and a player, people did that on their teams, right? So I joined the team and I'm like, hey folks, I can't afford it right now, right? Like Trevor's not working and blah, 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 and the team self-subsidizes and they just pay the team fee. In soccer, we've had some individual fees that we would subsidize. I don't know what the current practice is, and I can't think of it coming up. We'll have to get back to you.
Maxim just texted in. We do offer it for.
That's awesome. We have teammates listening virtually because that's great. We have some incredible
Financial doesn't
Great.
or expand adult sports. There's no financial assistance for adult sports. Any other questions on this slide?
It's the.
Folks, you're hearing the first of Monday of the month flood siren testing.
Spring flood.
So that's the first Monday of every month now through September. Yeah, and it was also, I forget what time it was this morning. I was out walking the dogs. They do it, I think, twice a day.
And it's, I think feel a bit more urgency with it. It's starting to feel a bit chilled out.
That's good. It's been 10 years.
So how are we doing on time since we have a time check here?
We're doing good. We're actually going to give you an exercise to complete. So Stacy's going to hand it out to you. You are going to have 3 different pages, one for community, one for recreation, and one for exclusive. We put in the different categories or types on the left-hand column, the examples right next to it. We're looking for your interpretation as far as what should the ideal cost recovery be for these types of programs. And what we're going to do at the end of this is look at everyone's results, look for outliers, and then we'll share out everyone's feedback that they provided at the table meeting. But the intention is to really identify, is there a consensus as far as what the cost recovery target should be? Or are there huge gaps and variations within your opinions that we'll dig into?
I want to say one thing out loud, and especially as we have new board members for open record compliance, what will happen with these is that they'll get scanned and become part of the official meeting record. One thing we can do to give you full confidence in doing this is an experiment to reveal where we have differences, right? So your name, please do put your name on them, but we'll label them as draft and note that they're part of facilitating the conversation.
And I just do want to note that you'll see the low, mid, high SCR in those 10 to 39, 40 to 69, 70, 99. We're not asking to lock into a percentage rate. It's just as a guidance, right? Because what I think is a mid CR, Jackson could totally think it's a different set of numbers. So they're just a guideline.
We're not asking you to put numbers. This can just be as simple as a
Check mark.
check mark. It could be numbers if you feel very adamantly that it's right there. And then the percentages that you see were just very much picked out of thin air. They do have some 30% range between them, but no science behind it otherwise.
Just to give everybody that level playing field.
How much time do they have for this?
We're gonna give you, say 10 minutes, and then we'll collect everyone back together.
What is access with FA?
Financial assistance. It's YSI. Youth Services Initiative.
So the Youth Service Initiatives provides targeted programming to kids living in low-income housing in Boulder, both at Boulder Housing Partners facilitated sites and manufactured homes and through school programming. Are there acronyms on the other pages?
Yeah.
Do they have all 3 pages or just, yeah?
Speaking.
This is such a good reminder for us. Thank you all for your grace.
So it's on like the last one, open access part, but like if we, that would be proposing a fee to use those things, is that if we.
This was thrown on here, so you had the activity. I don't think we would ever charge access to.
If you think we should,
No, I don't, I just.
feel free to plant the conversation.
Or what we.
No, we actually wanted your like open feedback.
Okay.
Maybe we have it wrong.
Too far. I think you will be too.
Sorry, I don't mean to put that. It's confusing, isn't it? Yeah. Did you have that conversation? That's the other things. When I moved over from open space and stop chatting, I was gonna. It's a good clarification.
What we should say. I fully agree with you.
And I think that the tricky part is we created the equity, visually.
That we've called him Clark.
Yeah.
Some dude, like, I don't have a ton of credibility.
We're gonna pull you all back together.
Feels like.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing the activity. And just really briefly, we just want to know what your thoughts were as you completed the activity. Do you have any aha moments? Anything that you're like, I had no idea where this should align, I just have to guess.
All that, yeah.
I had a hard time picking anything in the middle, like I was either pay for everything or pay for almost nothing. And there was very little where I said it should be a 50-50.
It was difficult. I would love for everything to be free, like you said, and of course, that's not the reality, so it's difficult to then just assign a value.
Any other thoughts at all that anyone like to share?
One of my thoughts was that if things aren't completely subsidized and free, there is sometimes misuse of those activities. For example, childcare could be easily misused by someone who doesn't really need the services and is taking advantage of the system. I think a nominal fee is one way that can help mitigate that issue. We see this with transportation, like if you have completely free public buses, then people who are not otherwise sheltered might just ride the bus all day and, you know, take over the bus as their living quarters. But a small fee helps prevent that.
Did anyone feel anything should go over the 100%?
Maybe personal training.
Golf.
Had a few things in that category of high 90s or 100 that were, you know, very much individual activities or hard to see a community benefit to some of the things there.
But the golf range is 100, but the golf rounds is the next category down. It's because I see more community benefit in people playing golf together and getting out. And whereas like there's the golf range is something that so many people do, and it's like less fee sensitive. And there's like limited community benefit to someone just like hitting a golf ball by themselves. So that was seemingly arbitrary, but like as a golfer, it just seemed like there was a rational division there.
Like tournaments, that's one thing I thought could be definitely way over the 100%.
Because of the competitive nature and the limited access.
People are coming from all over being fighting to do everything, so.
Yeah.
Seem like we should. Here, make that bridge.
But I struggle with the camps because, you know, I know as a parent of kids, I know how expensive camps are and how it benefits, you know, a lot of working families, you know, to be able to have access to that and make it affordable. But, you know, along kind of Chuck's point of camp, it's a very big service to offer at very low cost without a lot of recovery. And so the few times it's mentioned here, like I said, I really struggled on where that should fit on the spectrum.
And could different camps be at different?
Yeah, I think
spectrum,
that's
right? Like,
kind of general camp, or, you know, I did do that, like, you know, some of the more targeted camps, I put on the lower cost recovery. Can't say them here, but like, yeah. Exactly.
There are other restrictions around the childcare that instead of like using cost or charging people money fees to regulate how they're used, like are there other restrictions like 2-hour max or something like that, so people don't drop off their kids all day
Yes.
to go to work like that?
It is limited. It's not a licensed programming, so because it's not licensed, there are very strict time limits put out by the state that we have to follow.
So it seems like under that situation, it seems like it'd be hard for someone to abuse childcare.
can I ask a follow-up? Chuck mentioned that it was pretty polarizing for him, that it felt very clear either taxes should pay for something because of community benefit or the individual should pay because of individual benefit. And I'm curious if others had a different experience with it, like everything is both.
I don't think I didn't add anything on the ends. I think I had more kind of in the kind of 20-yard range, I guess. Yeah, so I wasn't as wasn't as kind of black or white on that. I was more in the middle, but definitely kind of, I had a lot kind of right on the line at 20 to it's like no cost to 10 and, 40 to 69 to 70 in that range. So
I like the idea of full cost for recovery. Charged to those who can afford it and heavy subsidies to those who can't afford it. And so maybe the end result of that is a moderately subsidized program, but. So when I was filling those out, I was thinking more along the lines of people who can afford it should pay. Get a full cost recovery for those individualized activities.
I had a hard time with full cost recovery for anything. I did mark it down for a couple, but I just see our whole goal of our department is if there is any semblance of community benefit that we should be making it as available as possible to everybody. And so I start with the presumption that like we're gonna probably subsidize most, if not everything, 90% plus of stuff that we do. But to Anna's point, there are certain programs that like tournaments and very specific types of camps or hitting golf balls on the range that like really have limited public benefit that like it's nice for that person, but not necessarily for the community. But I really swayed toward the like, maybe I'm just a socialist or something, but I just really see like, we should be really trying to provide as much benefit to the public and access as possible. And it's the exception rather than the rule that you do cost recovery.
I like that philosophy, but that's not our funding structure with our city. That's the problem. Right?
Totally agree. That's just how I was oriented on it. And I did definitely put a bunch of like 70 to 99 cost recovery and very few 100%.
So thank you all. Hit the nail on the head. This is supposed to be thought provoking. There is no right answer. We'll look at consolidating all of your answers, seeing what the ranges are, and we'll share that with everyone in the April prep meeting. And Chuck, to your point, yes, we have limited funding, so that is one question we always have to balance. And I think we will get there in 2 slides. Next slide. So this is just kind of a quick high-level recap as far as the general fund subsidy level. GF stands for general fund. I'm sorry for the acronym there. We went over this with you last month. This is the chart on the right-hand side showing that in 2023, we have received about 2.1 million in funding that's split across 3 different funding categories. That is our community benefit, our age-based discounts, and our financial assistance. 1.5 million is 1.6 million is considered the baseline the department receives. So we do have this as a hypothetical question. If the 2.1 million were to be reduced down to 1.6 million, how would that change your cost recovery targets?
I want to add just some context here. This is the specific subsidy to the recreation activity fund. So it's all these activities we've been talking about. It is not specific to the subsidy for the parks and for other services. So this is specific to the recreation activity fund.
And I know no one likes to do more with less or increase fees or decrease programming. So this was another thought-provoking question. We're just looking for your guidance if the general fund subsidy does not, I think it's $2.1 million. Does that change your opinion on cost recovery targets? Does it mean all programs should increase by X%, or do you specifically target certain programs to have an even higher cost recovery than you initially stated?
General fund subsidy is used primarily for recreation subsidies for low income households. Is that a correct statement?
It's low income households, age-based discounts, so youth and seniors. And then our expand and YSI programs, so people with disabilities and targeted low income properties.
We'd not like to see any of those cut. So we would have to make up that difference somehow. And if that has to come from higher fees and higher cost recovery for those users that can afford it, then that would be the cost. I think.
Wouldn't agree with an across the board kind of increasing cost recovery, more kind of a targeted approach, like we did here, kind of play with the different levels based on need or community benefit.
Anything else to add there?
I have a question. I apologize if this is like maybe a question, but when we look at this type of budget, do we also consider like, what if we drove more people to our programs at the same income levels?
And please don't apologize for the new guy questions. I think you get a year's grace period. Most PrAB members will tell you it takes a year or so to get up to speed. And what I'm really grateful for is that you're both diving in and asking questions. Sometimes board member, right? So I just, on behalf of all of us, and I think the board members, like, please ask questions. You're here for your brains and we need them. I want to, and to soften the ground for all of you, we know we have 3 levers around addressing our funding gap. We can increase fees. We can increase other funding, whether the tax subsidy or grants or philanthropy, or we can reduce services. I just heard Chuck say not interested in reducing services, right? That's certainly would be the last. And so what you just said is the other. How do we increase revenue, either from fees or participation? One of the biggest reasons we've had a $600,000 increase in subsidy the last 3 years is because we've had such a significant change in the volume of visitation at the recreation centers. It has not recovered. And that's been, and so I think part of what we're preparing for is a conversation that says, okay, the pandemic's over. You don't need that 600,000 anymore, but our costs have skyrocketed and the cost of those community benefit services have skyrocketed. So we still have a funding gap, even though the pandemic is over.
Just make sure I understand, you said the usage of the rec centers has increased.
Usage of the participation is at about 50% of what it was pre-pandemic.
I see, okay.
Is that, Jackson, is that 50-ish?
I think on the converse side of that, you could look at something like the golf course, which has not changed its fees since 2019, but usage is up over 40%. That is probably tied to people being outdoors, reinterest in the sport, more free time. It's a safe outdoor activity to do in small isolated groups. But that's an example of an area where we have not changed pricing for 4 years now. And we've actually seen a 40% growth that the overall revenue collected is astounding compared to direct expenses.
I thought our recreation center usage was recovering at a
There's
increasing rate.
2 ways to look at it. We have the visitations per hour, which is probably 85% of what it was pre-pandemic.
That's what I'm thinking.
One of the changes that we did make was a huge decrease in the overall availability of hours.
Right.
So our actual hours of operations and available hours has decreased. So visitations per hour were at about 85%. Total volume of visitation over the course of the year is at about 55, 60% right now.
There's another variable we have to add, and that's the pools aren't operating at the same level. And it's not because of funding or operations, because we don't have enough lifeguards. And so on any given weekday, we have 1 pool open instead of 3 pre-pandemic, right? So that's another factor really limiting participation. And why, anyone who wants to be a lifeguard, we're hiring, and we have training offered every 2 weeks.
So just to get back to my question, like,
Yeah.
and again, this maybe has had a budgetary conversation, but what are we doing to address that trend?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. So gymnastics is an area that is doing very, very well. That team is finalizing a business plan now that would show them investing in that program to generate even more revenue. The golf course is doing the same thing, and we anticipate when the new facility, they're about to open a new building, it'll do so with a whole new business plan to help drive even more revenue. We're going to be doing a similar thing in other program areas.
What are the rec centers themselves?
A business plan for the rec centers? That's a good question.
Yeah, and looking at me, I think coming in and analyzing where we're at with our facilities, I think hours of operation is one of the key things that we need to continue to look at, and that's based on public demand. So I think as we see usage continue to grow and people wanting to get in earlier in the morning and stay later in the evening, we'll have to reassess and take that data and make some tough decisions about expanding hours. But oftentimes when you expand hours, that doesn't mean more revenue coming in or very little revenue coming in, and your expenses can go up substantially. So that's something we need to really look at, and we're trying to serve as many people as we can.
I think two areas where there is work in progress. One is the lifeguard work, right? So Scott's sponsoring, and we have teammates across the department working on what we're calling summer squad this year. So that's the seasonal recruitment. So the more pools we can get open, we know that's going to drive more business. It is one of our niches in this community that we have 3 rec centers with lap pools, and this is a lap swimming community. So that's where a ton of focus is going. The other area that is doing really well to drive visitation in the rec centers is health and wellness. So we have a team of 3 women that are adding program almost weekly. If you get our new, if you two don't get the BPR newsletter, will you just maybe I'll make that one our one-on-one, will because you'll get updates from us, our e-newsletter, and you'll see, like just today, I got the April fitness update, and it included the new classes we've added at all 3 facilities. So that's one way we drive business. They're adding new class formats, they're adding new instructors, new class times. So there is work happening, but as far as an overarching rec center business plan, there isn't one at this time. That's something for us to think about.
Thank you. My inclination would be to let's get more people indoors before we talk about let's increase costs.
Fees, but by call, you mean,
Yes.
yeah. Gotcha, thank you. Yep.
Any other feedback here?
Is the limited hours of operation also due to staffing shortages, or is that only for lifeguards?
Mainly for the aquatic side of things. Entry desk operations is in much better shape than the lifeguard situation for sure.
In 2020, when we reduced service levels due to the pandemic, we did a very comprehensive look to see what time had facilities been accessed every hour of the day in 10-minute increments to be able to cut strategically. And I think that it was more based on the interest of the public rather than staff availability. I think that we could scale with pretty quick notice if we needed to on staffing side. Excluding aquatics. I'll continue to hit that up. Okay, we've got one final slide.
All right, so just up here, just some other policy questions that we've got and just love your feedback on is, how broad of a range should cost recovery targets be? I think we kind of touched upon that, if we should go over 110%, but if anyone has any other feedback, we'll certainly do the analysis and report back in April. Some thoughts on that?
One question I'll ask, is some agencies we're seeing that their cost recovery targets are a 10% range, and with others we're seeing a 50% range. Does the board have any input as far as how broad of a range cost recovery targets should be to clarify to the community?
I'm not sure I follow. What are the targets?
The target would be what our staff aims to achieve for a program. So if a program has 75% cost recovery, they're covering 75% of their costs.
So it'll be 70 to 80%.
Versus 70 to 130% or 20.
How confident do you feel the targets are going to be?
It's something that we would strive to do, and as you're introducing a new program, you would have lower cost recovery targets. And then as it matures, you're aiming for a higher cost recovery target. I think that the difficulty is making it too broad versus too tight. It is a very hard target to hit.
Regarding the resident versus non-resident question, aren't we directed by city council to consider non-residents who work in the city of Boulder as residents? So, of cost recovery, and has that guidance changed?
This is a question that the master plan didn't really address fully, that we are hoping to take back to city council and see if they still have the same input for us. I think from a practical standpoint, we have for facility access, if you live or work in Boulder, you're considered a resident, but if you go to register for a program, you're treated as a non-resident if you don't live within city of Boulder. But it does create a lot of complexities associated with it. The thought process behind it was people who work in Boulder are paying sales taxes when they're in town, contributing to the local economy. And that was a benefit to keep people here after hours and engaged in the community. So it is a conversation that we think could be a policy question as we're discussing the 24 budget development with city council.
Can parks have a separate policy than safety? Is that that's what the question asking? Like, can we do that?
This is not. I don't know if this is specific to Parks and Rec currently, or if it's all.
For resident, non-resident.
Yeah.
We're the only fee department that charges facility access fees. So while there are other forward-facing community service departments right now, libraries, HHS, open space, we're the only ones that have facilities and charge fees the way that we do. So the resident, non-resident question, open space does have non-residents for parking. But that's countywide. So it could be BPR specific. But we know that we need to work really closely with finance, because the idea is that our policies could be umbrellaed. And so let's say another department need to do it, that there wouldn't be different policies across the city.
Can I ask a question about the second bullet point? So I'm assuming that if you increase the range of what it needs to be viewed, that means less cost recovery, kind of how we code things.
And we decided to extend it to 21 years of age, right? You're accessing at 21, that's all under that bill category would now fall under that youth and see the sub-state.
Can we add like a teen rate, like a 13 to 18, that's more than youth, but it's less than adult?
And you would want to charge them more than we're currently charging them?
More than the kids,
Oh, interesting.
more than the 10-year-olds, but less than the 19-year-olds.
Huh.
It gives them, I don't know. They feel like they're.
Some agencies do that. I know some, and especially because, yeah.
I've seen just among my, I have a high school freshman, and I've just kind of seen the level of participation in sports drop off as they went into high school. So I think it's important to try and do everything to kind of keep that up. Because a lot of them had done, like team sports or other things, and now they're all just kind of not doing anything.
It's backed by research. We know there's a dramatic decline in sports participation when you get into middle school, and even more so when you get to high school. It's a national trend, and it could be a whole deep dive of a whole nother conversation, because we think it could be so critical for addressing the mental health challenges that kids today are facing.
And physical health, obesity issues. And
Those are less prevalent here in Boulder. They are issues, but we know mental health is a significant issue.
I think obesity definitely certain segments of the population. Even though Boulder as a whole is very.
The nonprofit for-profit is, what's the current policy?
We don't treat nonprofits any differently.
Is that standard across comparable agencies or comparable cities?
I think it's all over the board. It's the hard part, right? And this is the example people give all the NFL is a nonprofit, right? Like it just doesn't,
Wait,
Yeah.
that's astonishing.
exactly. And so it has not been our policy to provide any kind of a discount, because there's no alignment with with whether it should justify any kind of a subsidy or a discount.
Or even like the two soccer clubs, like Boulder Indoor Soccer is for profit and East United is nonprofit. They both offer soccer for kids, and they both offer scholarships, so I think you can decide one is more community or helpful than the other. Just that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Based on my experience.
Is the resident versus non-resident issue a big enough slice of the pie to be worth going after, or is it insignificant?
In terms of revenue it could raise.
Yeah. Are they, our non-residents are 5% of our facility users, or are they 30?
It depends. At our indoor facilities, they're about 10% of our, 10% or less of our users. For outdoor pools and Boulder Reservoir, they're over 30% of our users.
For expand, it's 50. We know that's because we provide a higher level of service than the other communities do, and so we're a feeder program for most of programs for folks with disabilities.
The resident fees are applied to non-residents only if they work in the city of Boulder.
In the city or for the city?
If they neither live nor work in the city, they are a non-resident.
That is the current policy.
Just saying, if we go after the non-residents who are getting resident rates,
Oh,
would that make a significant
Oh.
difference?
Yeah. We could model it out. I think without looking at the data firsthand, it's hard for me to have an estimate right now.
it'd be a guess. And my guess would be that it's small. That if we were to look at non-residents, I think the opportunities are around. So we did a research project on this once with the CU School of Public Affairs. We did a research that both looked at what are practices across the state and pulled and got some really good data. And then they also reviewed the research. And at the end of the day, what the research says is that your non-resident resident rates really should be differential, and it should be a way to drive participation. So for example, let's talk about boat permits at the Boulder Reservoir. We sell them out. We should jack the non-resident fees. That's what the research says. That's not our practice, right? It's standard. It's about 25% premium over. The research says you should increase that one. You know, there's a demand, so price it higher. Areas where we want to drive business, say rec center participation, you would maybe look at minimizing it and not charging a differential non-resident. So it should be a market pricing tool is what the research says. That's not our practice.
That's something we can look into and bring it back.
Are any of these really obvious sources of revenue, or are these just all kind of minor tweaks they all seem to be minor tweaks that are not notably?
Some of these questions came from, the feedback we did get from the benchmark communities. One did have a nonprofit or a for-profit. So we just wanted to make sure if we're doing this, we're thorough and we're getting your input and we're not missing anything. So these were just some of the things that came up to the top that we were like, we should be looking at this as well. So some did have a lower youth age cap. Some have a little bit older youth age cap. So that's where a lot of these questions are coming from.
I would really like to see some effort made to target, we've talked tonight about like teens and how participation levels really drop off. I mean, rather than talking about changing the age range, I think it'd be, as a revenue generation and a community health perspective, I think it'd be great to see what we can do to get teens, back into our facilities and using our facilities and, being active again. I know you guys are thinking about that, but that to me seems like an untapped revenue source and also something that could greatly enhance community health.
I'll make a quick plug for South Boulder Rec Center. There's the community space as well as the Ninja Room. So make sure you check that out if you haven't. The Ninja Room. So yeah.
We'll forward you the background. So they've repurposed some underutilized space, the racquetball court in a room, there's a ninja room that is open at different times. There's a community room open at different times. Kids are wandering down all the time from Southern Hills and Fairview during their off periods. And it's available for rentals and community use. It's pretty great. It just opened earlier this year, so I don't know that we have data yet on usage.
And we're marketing that to Fairview and Southern Hills kids.
Yep, and we even have a pilot reduced rate for Fairview kids to access it.
It's like-
Until 5 p.m.
That's like $2 or something.
You have to pay in addition to the rec center entrance fee, or you can just use that.
You just use the rec center fee, or it's $2 a visit. I believe.
You want to reserve it for private use, there's a different fee, right? But if you want to just join it when it's open to the public.
just to recap, for the library fees that are library funds that are being freed up by the removal, creation of a separate library district, that's going to be considered as part of the 2024 budgeting process and not separate. So
Correct.
we don't know yet how the outcome of that is going to be for Parks and Rec.
We do not. We know that there's $10 million available and we asked for 8.8, so. I'm guessing we're not gonna get everything.
But you asked that of the city manager, and the city manager goes forward with a comprehensive.
We haven't, go ahead.
We have submitted everything to the finance department's central budget. They basically rolled everything up from across all the city departments. There's about $30 million in asks. They've met with city council's financial strategy committee to kind of identify what the different themes are. It was very clear that it's difficult to look at the $10 million of library funding without looking at the comprehensive citywide budget. So they're going to fold it into the conversations as they're looking at every department's 2024 budget submission. What is your ask for library dollars? What are the outcomes and measures you're hoping to achieve? And all of that will be evaluated.
So it could help, but we don't know yet.
Is there anything else we should be thinking about at all? Anything that you feel we missed overall in the presentation?
Once again, really good.
We're 20 minutes over on time, so I do apologize for that. I really appreciate everyone's feedback tonight.
Really great questions and comments. All of this is gonna make this better. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
So we had originally outlined a 10-minute break. I wonder if we maybe make it 5 to move bio breaks. We have, I think, an hour and 20 of content on the capital, or is it 90 minutes?
Try and get what was it, 70 minutes to get us back on track?
Mark is really fast. No, just kidding. Does that work for you all if we do a 5-minute break? Okay. To remind folks, I know to just keep it to the most important, most relevant comments.
Midnight. Right, do you want to take it away now?
Yeah, so I know Elliot is on his way back in, but I'll start with an introduction because he's heard it a tad before. So earlier, actually, Chuck asked the perfect question to tee up this. He said, what's the difference between our capital investment strategy and the capital investment program? And we have a slide to talk about that later, but the capital investment strategy is how do we, and actually Bernie, I'm looking at you because you kind of asked this question during your interview. How do you decide? You have all these properties and all these services to provide. How do you decide where the money goes? The capital investment strategy is going to answer that question for us really for the next 5 to 7 years. And we're updating it because there's a whole lot of reasons why we're updating it. Catching up from the pandemic. We have new teammates on board with new expertise and information. We have new costs. Costs are escalating all over the place, and that has to change the way we spend money because some projects are no longer affordable, others are more expensive. We also are wanting to tie it to the values of the community as expressed last year. We have a unanimously approved plan that you both, Anna and Bernie, are going to learn more about. That plan was unanimously recommended by the PRAB and the planning board and then approved by city council. And so it really is our North Star. You're going to hear us talk about it all the time. And so tonight, in less than 90 minutes, Mark, building on work with teammates across the department and working really closely. You've seen tonight already how smart Jackson and Stacy are and the work they do in guiding our investments. They're going to talk about how we plan our capitals, what we've been up to, and lay out really the next few months and what it looks like on the capital for the budget development.
Thank you. And just to acknowledge some of the staff so you get a sense of it, all the service area managers and Deputy Scott were involved in this process. And then people like Dennis Warrington, Regina Elsener, Stephanie Monroe, like Stephanie doing the regional parks, Dennis doing park ops, Regina doing the natural resources. They are mostly involved with the capital side of the work, and they work with their staff as well to pull this together. So it's been probably involved about 30 people in total pulling this effort together. We'll split the presentation tonight into 3 parts. First part is we'll do an overview. Ali started to introduce that. We'll just confirm PRAB's role. Jackson had mentioned that at the last board meeting, and we'll just have a little slide explaining that just so it's familiar. And that also help the 2 new folk. Then we can just chat about that. We've got a few questions. And then we'll talk about what we've done in terms of what we think are ongoing process improvements. And then we'll actually show you the 23 CIP update with our draft 24 CIP. We'll have a discussion of that. Then there's a chance to get into our longer term investment strategy and how that aligns with our master plan. And we'll also talk about unfunded needs. And again, there'll be a discussion on that. So that's the 3 parts. As we go through this process, though, similar to what happened with Jackson and Stacey earlier, feel free to interrupt and ask questions. The big thing tonight is even though we'll put quite a bit of effort into this, we're at sort of stage 1. And we're going to be going through a process over the next months where you're looking at 24 and looking at the out years. So there's plenty of time to touch base on this again. And frankly, if we don't know answers tonight, we'll be able to get back to you and talk to you more about it in the next few months. Ali just mentioned the difference between these 2, and hopefully, Chuck, that was a pretty good explanation. The only thing I would add was, yeah, you can see that it was 2016 when we last looked at it. It really is, even though we look at it every year, the capital in terms of the capital improvement program, and we look 6 years out, this is our chance to take a deeper dive. And to be honest, there was one day where Jackson and I were like, are we updating and refining kind of this annual cycle of renewing how we look at our capital improvements? And we decided to kind of go back to the ground and build it up again from scratch. We thought was the best approach. And there's reasons for that, like the new master plan, some new guidance citywide that we're getting. We're starting to get a better understanding of our asset management system. So you'll see that tonight, starting to rebuild our CIP here with that 6-year outlook and a little bit beyond that. And this is basically how that cycle works for the capital improvement process. What you see in year 1 is we do put together a 6-year plan, and we're going to talk about that tonight. In year 2, we go back into the annual capital planning and we say, okay, what do we need to tweak over the next 6 years? And we've added a year into that, obviously, because we've moved a year forward. One of the things you'll see us doing now, and I still struggle to explain this, you approve the next year's capital budget, don't you, in coming up in June for the next year. Meanwhile, we start work planning for that budget in the sort of final quarter of the year. What we want to do is to get things better synced up, is actually do our work plan and our CIP together. So we really come up with a 2-year work plan, even though you're approving 1 year ahead. So you get a better sense of how the two are tied together, our operations and our capital program. And that also helps us, because in all honesty, most capital projects are 2 years, even 3 years. It's very rarely that just last 1 year. So that'll give you a better sense of transparency on how we're thinking. And then year 5, there's a little thing I'm pointing out there in terms of, as we're doing this, typically our CIS has been a separate project. And what we're going to do now is, because the MP's master plans are regularly updated every 6 years, instead of having a separate CIS, which was pretty special, Parks and Rec, frankly, having that strategic approach, we'll start to wrap it into the master plan, so it'll be part of that update. And that again will make things more efficient, easier for the board, easier for us, just make things sync better and align better as we do that thinking. And then, so what's guiding sort of our bigger picture thinking? This is something I think we sent out the master plan as a link. I hope we got a chance to read those 120 pages before the night. The point is that there is major highlights. I mean, that's the point of the master plan. It goes into various levels of detail. At the largest scale, let's say, is these 6 themes that are really driving how we should think about it. And as a board, this is the policy that you approved, recommended to the city council, who then approved, and all the public engagement that went into it. So this is the highest level of policy that we really want to be thinking about when we're putting together a longer term work planning effort for our capital program. And that's when you get into the detail of the master plan towards the end of it. You start to see not just the bigger picture sort of strategies and goals, but now you start to see actual actions. And those actions are tied to 3 things. If we identify a project, it's either going to be fiscally constrained, what we kind of afford with our current budget, the action, what happens if we get a little bit extra money, in the vision, what happens if we do full build out. And at the moment, we really are in the fiscally constrained world to our work. Talk a little bit more about that later. So this is just sort of summarizing that process. We're really looking at the 6 years, and that's tied to implementing the recent BPR master plan approved in 2022. It's informed by the asset management program. We'll talk about that a little bit more because that's coming into the fore now as we better develop that effort. In the 2-year work plan now, we'll have that coordinated with the citywide CIP. There's literally just last week, Ali leadership team and then the main planning managers basically created a new planning review team to do better coordination on bigger projects like Alpine Balsa, Boulder Junction, things like that. Then what are the prioritized needs for Boulder Parks and Rec? And like I said, we'll do that 2-year outlook so it's aligned with the CIP along with our operating plan. And then typically, PRAB, you'll still update, as we're going into now the 24 CIP season by July, I believe, we'll get the recommendation. And this is just a general slide. There's probably a little bit of sticker shock here. Jackson and I, Stacey, a few of us have been working on this. In the past, generally, you've seen the total allocated for BPR CIP funding. So through 2029, that's approximately 64 to 69 million, depending on revenue streams. That's why we can't give you an exact figure. And that's the amount you'd normally be seeing and saying, great, we've got that in hand. How do we allocate that? We also have something called CCRS funding. And that is where different departments compete for basically a tax funding. And at the moment, that isn't allocated, it's a request. And initially that was around about 20 million. And with cost estimates, with costing increases, better cost estimating, better understanding of scoping, we're starting to see that is around about 35 to 42 million. And that's for 3 particular projects. The civic area, phase 2, which we talked about with Shahomi, our project manager, a few months ago. Pearl Street, that'll kick in 2024, and that's a renovation of Pearl Street. And then lastly is the Boulder Creek Path. So there are 3 projects where we've got money to do the design, community engagement. We'll then go back to council to go into that larger pot to see if we can get that funding to support the construction side of those projects. The third line, Jackson and a few of us, Tina, have come and talked about identifying funding for our rec centers. And this is working with our facilities department. we work really closely together. We're realizing that the total cost of the 3 rec centers for full renovations will be about 107 million. And that's using the latest figures that are coming into us. Initially, even 5 years ago, we were down to like about 20 million rec centers. You start to see some big sticker shock. Part of that is some ways cost estimating wasn't as good back then. We've got better ways to do it. We're also seeing cost increases, and we're also recognizing these things are reaching the end of the life cycle and not just like simple fixes. And then the bottom line, underfunded, typically we've been in about 20 million on that. And what's happening here is it's not that we've got like things falling apart in the system. It's simply that we're starting with asset management program to count all of our assets. So if you count the big facilities, like capture 20 of them, which is a kind of easier thing to do before you've got an asset management program, you can say we've got a 20 million backlog. However, you start to capture things like the courts, smaller scale structures, all the bathrooms, you start to add that in. That's when you see this increase in unfunded, just because we're doing a better job of capturing all the assets across the system. And again, there's other factors as well, but that's the main reason why you're seeing that. We'll talk about that later.
Quick question, the CCRS is the community culture tax, is that correct?
I'm looking at Jackson.
Correct. Community culture and resilience safety tax. This was the one that was renewed by voters in November of 21.
I thought that went to very specific projects, though.
Yes, I mentioned 3, the Boulder Creek Path, Pearl Street, and the civic area.
The ballot language referred to projects that could be done, but central finance and city council will remind you that it's projects may include ...
Okay.
So we still do need to go through the competitive process because it was a named project. We do believe that there is a higher likelihood to receive funding. But there is very much the perception that there is some flexibility to have that funding.
Okay.
I'd love to add 2 details that I think are important. One is that the design for several of these projects is funded by CCRS, which is a good indicator. The Boulder Creek Path, the civic area, Pearl Street. So that is funded for design by CCRS funding. The other thing I'll point out is that when the tax was renewed, it first had been a 3-year pay-as-you-go capital tax, and then it was a 7-year pay-as-you-go capital tax. This last renewal, it is because of the breadth of unfunded projects across the city. City council made it a 15-year tax that's going to generate about $10 million a year. So $150 million. There were less than half of that named projects in the ballot. So what they intended was that more of the money is reserved for future councils and future needs. So there's an initial tranche of funding that is expected to be funded based on what was named, based on current needs, leaving, in 5 to 6 years, probably another conversation.
Can I ask a clarifying question about planning board?
Yeah.
And this actually is on the last slide. Does the city charter specify that the planning board has to approve these capital expenditures too? Okay. So are you giving this, is this presentation being provided to them as well?
This is more internal for how we think about our capital investment strategy, but then Jackson and Stacy take it through the budget process, which you've recommended. That's when it comes to that.
When it goes to the planning board, it's really combined with all citywide projects. They'll typically highlight 1 or 2 per department. They're not going to go through our 140 projects over the next 6 years.
Okay. And then, yeah, and that's interesting. Just the final note on the CCRS funding. For instance, we put in 8.5 million for the civic area. That was the cost of phase 1. And even phase 1 saw a cost escalation from 900K to 10.5. We worked out about $1 million an acre. We're now at about $1.3 million an acre. So that'll be about $26 million for phase 2. So council like, oh, that's a big increase. So we might even end up then having to phase 2. I'll look at value engineering, I'll look at scoping. So all those things will be factored into this various levers we need to pull to make this apply. Okay, so we've sort of went through that a little bit quick, but just to pause here. Is there any questions about the investment guidance at this point that's in the approved master plan? Are there any questions about our capital planning process? And then do you have any questions about your own the process? And Jackson and Stacy kindly provided bullets from the previous presentation here, just to give you an update on that.
How have we historically, I forget, provided our recommendations to city council?
That's a good question for someone who's here before.
Typically, your final prep memo that you receive in June will have a list of all of our projects, the dollar amounts and the funding source. And we then provide you the motion language of recommending the CIP in its entirety and specifically the Permanent Parks and Recreation Fund as recommended to the planning board and city council.
Hey Jackson, could we have an honesty session here as well? Like we sat down and typically in the past, a lot of CIPs are in buckets bundled. But sometimes that's just in it. It's a good approach. It's a way to say, oh, for facilities, we need about 2 million. You guys okay with us approving that? We'll sort of figure out the projects as we go. And we made a decision here because we've got a lot more information than we did in the past with the asset management program improving and things like that. We've gone into more specific projects you'd see tonight, which frankly does allow for a lot more scrutiny and you kind of be, do a little bit extra homework and sometimes you can make mistakes, but we're hoping that's just a more transparent process. It'll be a big improvement. And for the new folk, any questions on the role or the process? Because I know this is a big one to take on. Feel free to ask other program members.
How much lead time are we gonna get with the, so it happens in June. Are we gonna be provided with the materials we need to review the Wednesday before that meeting? Or is this something we can, like, is there a chance to get stuff sooner than that?
Like Jackson, please.
This is going to continually build on itself. So tonight you're getting a list of the overall projects. It includes some dollar amounts, but not necessarily the fine details for everything. At the April meeting and the May meeting, we will start including a spreadsheet that shows the breakdown of the years, the funding source, the project. And that will just continue to get further refined that there will be discussion points at the April and May meeting before you have to make your formal.
Okay. And you may see us as staff making, hey, we made a change from last month. We just found out this budget or scope or yeah for the project.
And I think similar to what we did with this presentation, we're always happy to share materials in advance. We know that the more dense and complex they are, the more processing time is useful. So we can look at sharing PowerPoints in advance.
Just a teaching moment for the new board members. Typically, when you're going to take formal action on an item, so for the CIP, that'll be in June. The month prior, you'll have a discussion item on that topic so that you see a 90 to 95% draft. Give us all your feedback, and then we shoot for a clean read at that final approval where we said, hey, you gave feedback on this, here's how it's reflected, or you gave feedback on this, here's how we looked into it, and this is what we learned. And so the idea is that in June, when you or whenever you take action on something, you've seen it before and given your feedback, and that's been addressed.
Everyone's okay, we'll move on to the next section. And actually, it's a good point you make. We're happy to share this PowerPoint afterwards as well, so you've got it as a reference. We'll talk about now what we hope are process improvements for our capital improvement strategy that we've made since the 2016 update. And then we'll actually dive into the projects. And typically you would have seen 1 year ahead, but like I mentioned, you'll see 23 and 24, because we did actually dive back into this year and have to make some adjustments along with the following year. In future, we'll be looking 2 years ahead as we get ahead on this cycle, as it were. So we covered this, I think I came, was it Brad? We first came with an introduction to this subject matter, and we talked about some of the challenges then, and we're just kind of repeating these here. Some of the things we've seen with our CIP, and just to be clear, we've almost built up a little war chest because of COVID and things like that occurring. So you'll see us spending quite a bit of money in the next few years, and then that'll level off a little bit. But the reason for that, yeah, is COVID slowdown, just a massive effect on everything. We also have, I think about the fact that a lot of our assets really are aging and they're unfunded in many respects. The recreation centers being big sort of billboard in lights examples, but across the board, bathrooms, aging, picnic areas, facilities. And so we're really got to think about that, and it's as we take care of what we've got and add less new over time, then you basically reaching the end of life cycles on various assets. We've got slowdowns in permitting, no one's fault, just things like staffing, etc., volume. So we've been working with our planning department to try and improve that. Cost escalations, sometimes we're adding, it feels like 7% a month. It works out on average about 7% a year, which is huge. And so that causes instability in how you can think ahead. It has effects. If you fund one project and have to add more money, that takes another project off the plate. So it just makes it more complicated. Definitely staffing transitions. And myself and you, we've got 3 new members of the team and just in planning section alone. And then also one of the challenges is trying to understand the true cost of the system, but that's also, as I mentioned, with the asset management program, we're going to see really big changes there. And if tonight's stage 1, I'm hoping in 12 or 18 months, we can come back to perhaps showing you a whole updated asset management program. And that's actually one of our, on the right-hand side, process improvements at the bottom tab, bullet there, identifying BPR's assets and needs. And even though we're not all the way there yet, we've been able to use a lot of that information, and I'll show you examples in a moment that helped think about prioritizing our capital program. We've also obviously got the master plan, we mentioned it, the 2-year outlook I mentioned, understanding the life cycle, we've been getting better at that. I've mentioned the integrating with the citywide coordination. One thing we have been doing, that next bullet, improving scoping and cost estimation, that goes back to we talked about a bundling approach. We've spent a lot more time and effort getting into projects and trying to scope them better and better understand the costs. So instead of getting what you call like an order of magnitude, our best guess, we're actually trying to like identify what the typical assets are for a typical project, get a good cost estimate of them, and then add in something called a sort of contingency. And that allows us to basically get better cost estimates so we can be more accurate with the types of projects we can think about. And then we also have been thinking about this idea of there is an increase in revenue stream. Obviously, Jackson and Stacey can speak to that better than I, but that's been able to support more projects down the road. And then the way we sort of ended up thinking about that as we rebuilt the system, this is a very critical slide, is there's really 3 areas that we want to focus on. And this is what we call the work plan categories. So what I like about this is asset management at the top, asset management, and please feel free to ask questions about that. Basically, it's any asset we own on the system, a facility, a structure, a field, a parking lot, you name it. That is the built structure or the thing that supports the recreation activity or the programs we provide. And that is the essence of capital and how we invest in that. And what you'll see is the way we think about that is not just a one-off funding. That requires annual funding to maintain it every year with the maintenance approach. And then in parks and recreation facilities, that's more saying, well, if we've got a single asset we're taking care of, like a tennis court, what about a park where we're starting to say, well, actually, there's a whole park that needs renovating, like let's take a look at North Boulder Park. We're not looking at the whole park, but the northern section of the park, because we're building a bunch of assets together. It's more complicated, and we've got reasons for some new development in there as well, related to community needs. So the park and recreation facilities really has a little bit of a bigger picture outlook and is a more complex way of looking at how we spend the strategic investment money. And then the last one is the system planning. If the first 2 are basically concrete actions that lead to implementation, construction on the ground, the system planning is saying, let's not get sort of comfortable with where we're at. Let's really think about some types of plans we need to help us think about future investments so we can stay at a good level, at a high level. And that's the easiest way I can explain those 3 categories, and we'll dive into detail on them in a minute. But I think it's going to be helpful for PRAV and actually for us as a park system to really help implement our capital investment strategy. So what does that look like? Well, the asset management itself is, and I won't spend too long on this, but the bottom line, it's an inventory. You calculate the value, look at the condition, what are the requirements to get it back to a good condition, and then how do we prioritize it, because we can't do everything. In a nutshell, that's how we think about the assets in that category across the system. Here's an example for our North Boulder Park. And this is really, because we're talking about process improvements here, what you're seeing there on the right is all the facility assets and types for that park. You're seeing on the left the condition of those assets, good, fair, poor. And then we're starting to build in costs. That's not coming up here, but that's the next step. But imagine having that for every single park across the system. That's our goal in the next 18 months. And therefore, in terms of transparency, this is at the moment an internal database. These are things we're hoping to be able to share with PRAV, with the community, so they can really see what it takes to manage the system. kind of get into the underbelly of it. And then this, this could go to midnight if we wanted to. This is a working. We don't. I just not. It's like, what the hell? I got paid music now for this. So I just click on this for a minute. I'm not sure if this will work. This is an internal thing we're working on. Again, though, I'm hoping in 12 or 18 months' time, this will be available to the board, to the public. So, for example, you can say, hey, I'd like to see what's happening in 23, 24, 25, and you'll see projects pop up on a map, you'll see them listed. You'll start to see percentages of how that works, and then you'll see the kind of budget over the years for those projects. And you'll be able to ask things like, well, is it new? Is it enhancement? Is it maintenance? In part of the facility plan. And these dashboards built off, it's a reporting tool built off our asset management program that now includes our capital investment program. Bottom line is you can go in here and type in anything like pilot. And it says,
This is sharing to.
oh, okay. That's just a shame. I'm so excited to show you that part. Anyway, if you could imagine that you typed in pilot, it would pull up all the projects that are going on there. And so the goal is ultimately that, yeah, this will be available to the public, available to the board, and you can dive into it. Frankly, we want feedback like, is this providing a sustainable approach? Is this equitable across the system? That'll help us all manage. Sorry that didn't share, but maybe next time we'll be able to pull that up for you live.
Send us a link.
All right, for sure. So with that, we sort of talked about process improvements. Now we'll actually dive into this idea of the next 2 years worth of projects and what we're going to be looking at. And it's going to be organized by those categories. So first off, you see our asset management program. And these occur annual. You see on the left, the category that hopefully speak for themselves. The one in the middle, you might ask, what's general maintenance? Well, some things you can't categorize easily. And so this allows our regional facilities and our parks ops to cover areas where things pop up like water fountains and stuff, which kind of sometimes the small change type stuff, but it's capturing that. The regional parks at the bottom, an example where in the past they didn't typically get an annual asset management funding, they tended to get one-off. So we're trying to build an asset management annual amount for the regional parks. So the second column is what was you actually approved in 2022 and got through council. And then now we're seeing here is the updated annual allocation, which you'll be looking at for the 24 budget, working with Jackson in the coming months. You'll see bathrooms and picnic shelters. We've seen a lot of vandalism occur, and we didn't used to have to take so much care of these. Frankly, just a lot of issues going on. So that's where you're obviously now seeing an annual allocation. Courts, this is a good example where we're looking at courts. Typically, we're trying to patch them, resurface. What we're trying to do now is say, actually, if we put in sort of post-tension steel into the foundation, we can increase the life cycle and reduce the maintenance costs. So sometimes you'll see us try to do a larger investment, particular asset, and to actually make it more efficient and save us money over time. Irrigation in pretty good shape. Forestry stays the same, natural lands. Parking lots, that's very similar to courts and the accessibility and mobility side of that. And that's the idea that even if we put in the 300, frankly, it's not enough, but it'll help us get into things rather than just the patching. It gets the milling and resurfacing, which again saves us money over the life cycle. And then play areas, that's something that's come up a lot. And that's the idea that nowadays it's between 300 to 800,000 to build a typical play area. At 200,000, we would have been, imagine how many. I think we could get one done every 2 or 3 years. Now we can actually get one done a year using this updated funding mechanism.
That's a new one from scratch or like a renovation?
It's a mix and match. Typically the 300s tend to be smaller in a renovation, the 800. The 300 tends to be, we're fixing it up or it's a smaller one. The 800 is, we're replacing it. We might be thinking about nature play plus prefabricated equipment as well.
Does that include like the access and mobility? Is that like if you want to make sure that play areas like you can use a wheelchair instead of having grapple or whatever, is that go all under play areas or access?
Thank you. Yeah, parking lots access and mobility is specific to cover that particular parking lot, how people access the park. But I would say is the play areas, we always think about the ADA and beyond, like the various requirements for those and what might be needed for the whole community. North Boulder Parks, which we've just got moving at the moment, is an example where we'll be really looking into that. And I think it's something we could probably improve upon as we do this.
Does that go into which budget?
Oh, so it's weed through all of these. It's just happens to be spelled out. But it is weed into everything we do. Is that fair to say?
I think it's perfectly said. Again, a bit of a teaching moment for new members. You saw earlier in slides about the 6 key themes of the master plan, but woven throughout everything we do are the concepts of sustainability, equity, and resilience. And so all of these projects, like, so for example, bathrooms, as we renovate bathrooms, we'll make them accessible. North Boulder Park right now, those are being converted into 2 all gender restrooms that are much more accessible. Courts, all of our courts, we make sure that they are ADA accessible. So, and same with playgrounds.
Actually, that's maybe too much in the weeds, but it's probably helpful. North Boulder at the bathroom, it's an example where the changing tables are typical for babies, but actually there's young adults who need changing. So it's looking at even the changing tables and the size to get it as accessible as possible. So I think that's some of the, yeah, we're trying to read it through everything. We're not perfect. Let's do our best. Yeah, but and now this is moving into the parks and facilities, and this many of these you'll actually recognize. I've been to the board before, but some of them I'll just point out. We touched on the Boulder Creek path. We're actually starting sort of the pre-planning this year. We'll be moving that into sort of full planning mode, design mode next year. So that's one you haven't really heard about much, even you just a general inclination of it. There's the 3 rec centers. You'll see there we've got TBD next to them, except for the East Boulder. The 100,000 is there to support community engagement. And Tina Briggs came, I believe it was last month, to chat a little bit about that. And you can see that's the one we'll be working on with our facilities department. East Boulder Creek plan, you'll see that at the 3rd from bottom there. That's an example where 2024 we're hoping to start major park renovations, variety of issues, sandball courts, the play area, the pickleball courts, etc., etc. And we're also trying to hopefully tie that in with anything that happens at East Boulder Community Center revitalization. So in fact, the year on that might be bumped around a little bit as well. So those two happen in conjunction. And then Pleasant View is an example where, this is a good example where we did do an access study. Darren Wagner, senior landscape architect, will come here in April. I think it's April or May on the study for that. And rather than just these plans sitting on the shelf, this is a good example where we can move to implementation now, not let it sit on the shelf and get out of date. And that covers things like access, mobility, and parking at the site. And then lastly, you're looking at sort of that bigger picture, like we said, thinking of the out years, what can we do to keep us in good shape? And you see a mixture of things there. The top one is an example of our design standards manual, which I think the board approved about 3 years ago. And we're not going to bring you the whole thing back, but we definitely need to update the cost estimating based upon the way the market's going. We are looking to do LOS, level of service, for the courts across the system. And we recognize that's something where we'll also be working with our partners, the tennis and pickleball community, and really try to work with them about what can be a public-private partnership to make this happen, especially if we can't meet all our funding needs. The natural land system plan, that's something Regina Elsner is working on and is very excited about. She's obviously got this new service area, and part of that will be really updating what the resource management needs are. So that's the 23-24 updates. So do you have any questions about those work plan categories? Any questions about the asset management program? And then lastly is sort of the meat and potatoes, anything about the projects and the 24 CIP update.
On the previous slide, Mark, you can go back to that. And are those costs like costs for, employee costs, or how does that, like the 100,000 to update the?
That's a great question.
What does that mean?
It's actually you working with what we're estimating it'll be to work with a consultant along with the staff team. And we're actually something we're looking into is actually, can we cut even consultant costs up? Can we actually bring on staff, which would bring down consultant costs, and then we're trying to keep the overall system planning as an overall CAP to around about 10%. That's getting difficult with increasing consultant costs. So hopefully a few more internal staff can keep that at the right level.
Jason, I'm guessing there's a question as far as, does it really cost that much to do that type of work? All of these things are fairly accurate costs. We do go out to bid because any of these are over $50,000. So it is going through a competitive process, and these are the estimated budgeted costs. It may come in slightly under, it may come in slightly over. If it comes in significantly over, we would come back to you and say, is this still a priority?
Just to go back, questions? Any other questions?
Are you generally happy with the Beehive software? That's been in place now for 4 years. That was a big deal when it first was implemented. We've heard
I do want to just put in a caveat. So just, and again, I'm probably being overly pedantic because we have new board members. So in the fall of 2019, we launched this Beehive software. 6 months later, our world exploded. And so I think we have to acknowledge that our implementation of the software has not gone as planned, because for all of 20, most of 21, like we've not been able to implement it the way we wanted. So I just wanted to say that because Mark's coming in now 3 years later and it's like, oh.
I wish I could have showed you the slide. Apologies, I thought that link would work. But all of this is running directly off Beehive. I think like Ali said, with COVID and the amount of staff time we were able to devote to it because of things like COVID and all these other needs, we never were able to fully implement the system. We wanted to. It's like some areas have really implemented, some areas haven't yet. I think you'll see over the next 12, 18 months, a huge change in that. And we'll be coming back to you showing you data that is sort of driving how we think about the asset management program, that will change the way we do investments. I can't be 100% confident around that. And it is always still just a tool where we as humans make a decision based upon that tool. But yeah, just to see the stat flow the way it is, you start, and that next map where you're seeing every single asset in a park map now, that will really give us a sense of how is the system in good condition, or fair condition, or poor condition, and what percentage. It will actually be able to answer those questions, which I think will be really helpful. It'll help us prioritize where our needs are. So I don't want to be 100% confident, but I think, Chuck, yeah, you'll see some good changes over the next 18 months.
I want to add just that there are limitations to the software that have also impact. I thought you were going to say some of the dirty laundry. I'm going to say some of the dirty laundry about the software. There are challenges with it. It is much more built for a public works system than it is a park system. And we do have challenges with the software that we're working through really thoughtfully. I appreciate Mark as the sponsor for our asset management work appropriately. And part of the work over the next 6 months is to do a bit of a status check with each work group. What works for you, what doesn't? So for example, for park operations, we're really limited by the in the field connectivity that it just doesn't work sometimes at a lot of our places. And so they're going back to the office and doing like data entry, and it's not working the way we had thought it would, where you're in the field and you take a picture and you do a work order and it's really streamlined and easy. It's much more data intensive. And so we're looking at ways to maybe have some logistics support so that it can work even better and not impact field operations.
This is asset management software that's supposed to track every asset, every park bench, everything in the entire park system.
And Chuck, the reality, is Beehive won't be the only answer. There'll be a couple of solutions we need to make it work fully. And that dashboard will be an example of where it captures the different software we're using to represent our full asset management. So that, well, hopefully we don't have to get into the details of the mechanisms, but when you see the results, you'll notice that it isn't just Beehive that we use.
Does Beehive have any functionality around the life cycle analysis portion of the asset management?
Yeah, exactly. So technically, like it'll basically, that cost estimating that you saw, that'll give us not only better cost estimating, but the current replacement value. We'll also be updating our facility, FCI facility condition. index, and from that, we'll create the API, which is our priority index, which has a series of criteria going into it. It is quality of human input, but it creates sort of a quantitative result of that. That's our goal. I think the thing I talked about earlier was in the past, it was fairly easy to do for that large buildings type thing. This will now cover, maybe that covered 20-30% of all assets. You'll see a sort of, instead of the tip of the iceberg, under the iceberg, the 70% of smaller assets now having some of those values.
I was gonna ask kind of a similar question. You talked a few times about things that are kind of, they've aged more than we thought, or they're, things are older, not as good condition as we thought. Is that like, that has come from the Beehive data, like that surfaced through that process, or is that just?
It's a good question. I've noticed this in my career generally in the last 10 years. I think we've, because of the parks movement and everything, a lot of things last 30-50 years. So we're just seeing almost a natural, this is my qualitative analysis, a natural sort of end of life cycle occurring on a lot of facilities that we're like, oh, wow, this is really hitting us now. We're going to think about it. And meanwhile, as well, in the past, we probably didn't track everything in greater detail, so we're also revealing more at the same time. And also, I think we used to let things band-aid a lot longer, and now we're seeing, because of code, regulations, safety, accommodating public need, we are really seeing it. Well, actually, the life cycle is this, it's not that. So a series of factors have gone into that, I think. Free to add, Jackson.
I would say we've never gotten to this level of granular detail. We would look at a park as a whole, not necessarily all of the benches across the system, all of the trash cans across the system. But it is giving us a much more granular look at how an asset ages within the individual parks and where it's located. So that plays a factor into it.
More questions? Should we move on?
I have a lot of questions about just like more specifics, but this doesn't have time to address. Well, I guess my question is because the documentation, documentation from last year review.
Oh, that's what you mean. Like, yes, can you explain that?
Sorry.
Where the FRAP's held?
We have what we took to the PRAB in May and June last year. As a memo with the CIP, the CIP at that point, documenting what the projects were, what the funding was, how it was prioritized. And I think because we're zooming out, looking at how we're doing this, that would be a really good starting point as far as what's the currently approved document. And then everything Mark's shared is how it's changing from that baseline.
Is that on the slide you can share?
Yep. Oh, yeah. And if you honestly any questions, feel free to call Jackson or I, or email us. This will help you out.
It's better things to do than field my questions.
Yeah. Is there any other questions at this point? Or wants to move on? Okay, we're into the last section. At the end of this, we've got an activity for you to do, just so keep us all sort of on our feet at this time of night. But now we'll just talk about the bigger picture. And actually, there's a lot of similarity with 2023-24, so I won't go into as much of the context. I'm just trying to get into the meat and potatoes, like I mentioned earlier, of this aspect of it. We'll talk about how it aligns with our master plan, and then we'll also bring up a subject that's a little bit new, is a little bit of a pun, our under and our unfunded needs, the hyphen and the dash in between. So basically, when we're looking out to the future, we look at the citywide guidance, and there's the citywide framework, which they refer to this as the sort of acronym is SAR, SER. It's sustainability, equity, and resilience. And we incorporate that into our policy thinking as we go through our bigger picture work planning. But one thing I'd say about this is it doesn't typically get called out specifically as an individual funding amount. It's weaved in the projects as a tool to make sure those projects incorporate that. And I can give a few examples as we go down the road. As we get a little bit better at this, at the minute, we do sort of do it in a qualitative way as best we can. I think as we get better with sort of, because this is pretty new, how do we build this in? We'll be able to have a bit more sort of data-driven approach to this. So that's an example where when I talk about process improvements, it's not happening tonight. It's like over the next couple of years, we'll be really efforts there. We've got the master plan guidance, and this is actually a map from the master plan talking about investment need prioritization that our GIS folk did a lot of work on to produce this for the master plan. So this is what I mentioned earlier. You see those symbols for equity, resilience, sustainability, and you see where they're sort of being applied here to various projects we've got across the system. For instance, big equity project at Violet Park. That's a working title for the park, and you'll be hearing a lot about that down the road. We've got East Mapleton, also, which will serve Boulder Junction needs, another equity project. The civic area design, a lot of us think of that as a park design, but actually it's a huge resilience project to think about water conveyance and the best way to do that while we also have recreation activities occurring here. BPR courts, I won't mention that again, but we touched on sustainability. And then the asset management East Boulder Community Park touches on both, excuse me, equity and how we think about the sustainability of that park. Then here's some good news. Sometimes it's good for the board and staff to be like, hey, we're actually doing this thing before a few years ago. So this is the master plan, and this is the specific actions in the master plan for facilities and for parks. And all I've done here is highlight in green the fact that when you see in the next couple of months the list of projects, you'll notice that we've managed to hit every project in that left-hand column for both facilities and parks in terms of some kind of investment over the next 6-7 years. The only thing I'd say with that is they all are in fiscally constrained, and at this point they're all funded, but some of them are not fully funded, and we'll get to that at the end of this. It's just our reality. But the good news is we're making strides on all of them, and that is, I mean, the master plan is the PRAB's main guiding policy. It's our main tool for implementing. So it feels good to think about the fact that we've been able to use the CIS to really consider how best to implement the master plan. So now I'll just dive in. I won't spend much time on this one because this is the asset management 25 through 29, and it basically repeats what you saw for 23, 24, obviously, because we're updating this. The one thing we've talked about, and a few of you brought up the asset management program there, as you can see, as we get to current replacement value, as we get better at asset condition, as we look at the overall backlog, we'll probably be shifting these numbers each year a little bit and rethinking where the priorities are and be working with you as you see this asset management dashboard coming out, that you can sort of think about how we best prioritize these assets guided by the policy. This is where you see the sort of main parks and facility enhancements over the next few years. Boulder Reservoir has approximately 5 million going into it. Same as East Mapleton in 25. Again, that supports Boulder Junction development. We've got a pocket park in Boulder Junction. We've got, we're looking in 2027 at Flatirons Golf Course. That's more the infrastructure. I know we've got a new facility going in, but it's a good example of a park, as it were, that hasn't had a big look at it for a long while. Valmont Phase 2, 28. And then you see Tom Watson at 29. And so these are all the sites through our process of prioritization we've identified as having the biggest needs. But I'd say is they're not all fully funded, even though they've got some quite large sticker prices next to them. And then again, you see us looking outwards, just basically system planning in terms of an accessibility plan in 2026 to get back to the earlier question, how can we entwine this across all our work and do a better job at it? What are the current trends and needs? We've also got a climate resilience plan that will probably be tied in with our city departments. And then we get to do the next recreation master plan in 2029. So in terms of, that was all the funded projects we've got long term. Here you start to see us developing a list of unfunded projects. Feel free to chip in, Ali. But we divided them into the three main, what we call CIP program types. And in the CIP program, you have one category for acquisition, one category for planning, but that's kind of the abstract side of it. This is the way you spend on the implementation construction side. It's either new, it's enhancement, as in big park improvements, or it's like that asset management we've talked about. And you can see the list of projects here. Some of these, like Tom Watson, has funding, but it doesn't I think we've got, at the best at the moment, we can allocate is 5 million. In truth, it's probably about a 14, $16 million project at this point, fully update that park, even within a fiscally constrained environment. So Boulder Reservoir, again, we've got about 5 million invest in that from enhancements. In truth, some of the costs coming in at the moment are more between 17 and 20 million if we were to update everything based on end of life cycle. For the new, we've got Belmont South partially funded. We've got Area 3 coming online. And then you just see in maintenance there, even though we've done a pretty good job, I think, of doing our best to fund a lot of those asset categories, they're still really underfunded. One of the new ones coming online is us thinking about green infrastructure, swales, rain gardens, etc. We haven't typically had a asset management annual category for that. It's often been more ad hoc funding applied when a project pops up. And then the final one I mentioned is the regional parks. We talked a little bit about that. That's Valmont Golf Facility and the reservoir. Although we've talked about those enhancement projects and life cycle, we've also got the typical maintenance and how do we get better funding the annual maintenance of those. And as an example, the current replacement value of something needs a 2 to 4% annual maintenance cost, doesn't it, to keep it in good condition? Some of those regional parks at the moment are really underfunded from that perspective. So these are just examples we're starting to, I wouldn't say this is comprehensive yet, but I'd say it's our best shot at understanding underfunded. You want to add to that?
I would say it's pretty darn good work considering Mark joined our team in June and we've had incredible transition on our planning team. So I think it's really well done.
So we'll actually have an activity on this to end the evening. But just at this point, pause. Excuse me. Is there any questions about the proposed 6GIP, knowing that we're going to run through June, working with Stacey and Jackson, talking more about this? Is there any real things we need to think about now to help prepare and support this process? And then is there anything about the proposed 24 allocation later spring, like what other information would help you make decisions here?
Just, you mentioned like, we have 5 million for this park, but it really would cost 14. Is there a way to kind of like what that looks like? I mean, I feel like we've seen some of that before, but if that's not too much work, but like what does 14 million buy you versus what is 5 million buy you on some of these projects? That'd be helpful just to understand kind of what are we getting versus what is the goal?
I'll be honest with you, we'll give you some sort of order of magnitude costs. Once we get that new updated cost estimating system on board, next year we'll be in a lot better shape to do that. But yeah, we'll be able to give you just a sample of the major projects outlined here.
Sure.
Would be reasonable.
So there are a couple of things that I'm not seeing here. One is we have the Boulder Junction Phase 2 development, EVAP 2 or whatever it's called. And the Mapleton ball field redevelopment seems like it would be a major layer in that. So that seems like a fairly major planning activity that should be on the horizon. The capital investment there, and I missed it.
Yeah, and so
East Mapleton Park, there it is.
and
I'm glad you remembered it though, because we're really excited about that project. It'll be critical.
the Boulder Junction Pocket Park actually is about 3 years scheduled in all honesty, and it's various reasons, staff transitions, updates in the way P&DS does planning, land use, urban design. But yeah, hopefully we'll hit that in 26, and then East Mapleton. Well, let's see, there was the staff kickoff meeting just last Tuesday, Wednesday. And then obviously board members are going to participate as well in that, and then Gaze back. So that should be pretty well coordinated.
Yeah, I guess this is one for Elliot because he's exactly on that. Multi-board committee. Yeah.
And there is, just to be clear, my understanding, there's no in the broader master plan for Boulder Junction, there's no identified public space or parkland that I'm aware of, but that's why the development at Valmont and Mapleton are so critical, because we know that's going to be dense multifamily housing and they're going to need green space.
Right, other than a very small pocket park, it's probably 6 of an acre.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
What'd you say, Jackson?
0.6 of an acre.
Yeah.
Speaking of equity, so I noticed that 2 of the parks that are either on or underfunded are major parks in South Boulder. One is Harlow Platts and one is Shanahan Ridge. So I'm wondering, like, how do we prioritize how we spend money enhancing parks to make sure that we're, meeting the needs of all, corners of the town, supposedly.
Yeah, that's a really fair question. I think with the East Boulder Community Center will help to some degree, as long as we provide multi-link transport opportunities. In the north end, obviously Violet. And it's, as we go around the system, this is like almost the best we can do with our current funding. We can get better at tracking it and reporting out on it, and that's something we're working on for like our KPIs for the master plan and the various, like you saw that map earlier.
Mark, can I want to chime in here?
Yeah.
Part of the reason Shanahan Ridge is up there is because if you'll remember about what Mark talked about earlier, when PRAB discusses the CIP, you actually recommend funding for the next year, but you see a slate of projects for the next 4 years. Shanahan Ridge had been identified for a playground replacement and park update. It has been deprioritized because there are parks that are older, more highly visited, and prioritize. When you look at asset prioritization, they're much more critical to the system. Barker Park is a great example. It's in the heart of downtown, amidst family housing. It's the play space for one of the most accessible daycares in the community at Boulder Day Nursery, and it wasn't on our plan. And so I just want to be blunt and point out that it's up here because it had been on the CIP, and we're calling out that it's no longer funded. We're not recommending it in the next 5 years.
And that's really what I was getting at, like, why are we deprioritizing that versus that? And that employing those factors makes sense to me, but I think that the result of that is that there's a part of town that, has aging infrastructure. But I think that makes sense and it's reasonable based on what you're describing.
And please, Elliot, when we get to the activity, it is on the underfunded. How should we prioritize it? So we're hoping to get feedback from you on that we can incorporate, because part of our role as like director of roads here will be seeing how do we look at these projects from bonds, additional revenue streams, et cetera, to help meet this underfunded need. And part of identifying the underfunded need is frankly to raise awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it all. But make some decisions.
Yeah.
Please.
I saw that there's a pretty good expenditure on bathrooms. And I was wondering, I've seen articles about kind of since COVID started and homelessness increased and the kind of opioid crisis, like all these factors are kind of converging all around the country. And there's a whole bunch of people using bathrooms in ways that people used bathrooms before. Is there, and that there's kind of companies are proposing new different bathroom models with like blue light that you can't see veins shoot up in, things like that. Are any of those initiatives like have enough track record to be able to evaluate whether it's a better investment than a like porta potty or a traditional restroom?
No, thanks. It's a complex question, isn't it? I mean, we saw San Francisco, what was it, 1.9 million for bathroom replacement. And we laugh a little bit, but it's time to tell you, like, to get your point. In Pearl Street, we had to close down the bathroom with some similar issues you described earlier. So we actually took Pearl Street as an example, and we'd be happy to share this with PRAB in maybe 2 or 3 months' time. But we're looking at all the current options out there that folks are using. One of them is sound music. There's cameras, there's having attendance, there's improved, frankly, a lot. We're basically moving to sort of prison standard robustness in toilets, which is, I don't want to say the greatest experience because that might not be the right way to go here, but it's not the most aesthetically pleasing approach to what you'd want to do. So yeah, we're starting to put in these different methods. We're not sure exactly how well each one of them will work, but over time, hopefully we'll get a better understanding of that.
Can you survey other like cities that have done something similar?
Yeah, we are already, but you're right. It's no, not too soon. Some of them examples I gave, we took from other projects that are going on in other cities, some of them we thought of ourselves. I think it's implementing them specific and seeing how they work. And then the trick, isn't it, is to tracking it over time and seeing what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, definitely it's even graffiti is a big thing as well as the different types of uses that are occurring. So we'll work on that.
In Colorado Springs, next time you're there, they have an Exalu, which is one of these new models that people are finding helpful in urban spaces where they see more abuse. We've talked to their director about it. They really like it. As we update restrooms, certainly as we build one in the civic area, as we do phase 2 of that project, we intend to include a more modern unit that'll stand up to harsh use.
What is next?
You asked.
You can Google it. So there's the Portland, Anna was referring to this. I think there's the Portland Blue, there's the Exalu. They're models and you see them in Europe also. In the middle of a square, you'll have just a one stall toilet that sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're not. You go in, you use it, it's timed. It has all kinds of features to prevent inappropriate use. 5 minutes, the door opens, the unit closes and gets sanitized. And then it's available for the next person. Highly industrial, all kinds of features to keep them safe and clean.
And we've got a 10-minute time check, just to keep us on track here. So there's a couple more questions and then we'll move to the activity, if that's all right.
Just one quick question. When you look at the development of rain gardens and other cool boulder approaches, will transportation be responsible for that or would parks and?
It's a good point. Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's transportation. And actually it's Scott Carpenter. We put in a rain garden ourselves for our parking lot. The new street improvements, transportation was going to put in a rain garden. We're working with them to make sure it's the same rain garden. So it just depends who's the lead on the project. But the good news is
You don't see that as a major source of spending in the upcoming years? It's gonna be-
it could be, it depends. We're seeing lots of advancements in the way we can do green infrastructure. One at the moment, which is just emerging for North Boulder Park, is we're talking about capturing water off alpine balsam, storing that at North Boulder Park underground and potentially using that to use for irrigation. So as new projects come online in this, like trying to assess the risk factors of cost benefit analysis of all of that, some of this new types of infrastructure as well. I think we'll see that grow over the next 5 years. Good question. Okay, you okay to move to the activity? Stacy's got a handout for you. Try to keep this as simple as possible. So we're going to stand up for the yeah. So we talked about the unfunded projects. You've got the list in front of you. So if you do the arrow keys, I'll go to the. So basically, so this confuses me every time. Pick 5 projects, maximum of 5, and rank them 1 to 5, 1 being high. And I know some of the new folk. So what we can do is like Ali and folks around help talk through stuff. And if you don't know the projects, what we've left is maintenance, enhancement, and new maintenance. Take care of what we got. Enhancement, a bit more investment in parks. New is brand new stuff going on the system. Feel free to just number it based on that category. And that's also helpful for us as we think about this.
So the first column is an overall ranking?
Yes.
But everything gets a 1 through 5 ranking.
Pick 5 of the projects and rank them 5. And then on the back of the sheet, thank you, Brian. One back, one back. That one. Is. Make me dance here. Just say, hey, this project, I think it captures this primary city theme. That helps think about why we prioritize it, doesn't it? And then, I think it aligns best with this master plan theme. So just write down what you think works best with that project from a prioritization perspective.
And let me also just, because if I see here in headlights looks, the idea again is to soften the ground and start thinking. And if you just have questions and we follow up at the April meeting, that's fine too.
Then we'll get to June, we'll see how well you did. Yeah, no, totally. We can even just chat about the projects if you want it. If we spend about 5 minutes on this, knowing that we can revisit this.
I don't know, but.
Yeah, we actually go to mapping.
So.
Oh,
I don't know. That's what you call this. What's in the law? And next to it. Yeah, exactly. And that's, to be honest. Here. Shanahan Ridge is too hard over here. I don't know. Yeah, it's just in this. Pretty small. What is area? Overstreet, yes. What happened, you know, every field. So the moment this. Using. And so we look at it. Yeah. Seems like I have to. Just expect me some more attentive.
here's what I think. Exactly what you said.
I agree, but at the same time, this is all by insurance on it. If I'm him, I have insurance on it. It's just-
He's not, it's not like it's the agreement, it's our hands.
So CAO to do the final revision.
Right. Inside. We can insure.
I just felt like it has to be.
What is that?
So that's
30 days, doesn't it? That's American. Keep the security deposits at the chair. And the boss.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm case, my question.
I think the plans is gonna know a little research on. He's already get- he's not getting out ahead. We're going, so.
And so I just feel like we just engage, I liked your suggestions. Phone call and we'll look at the biggest there. We're not paying them right. Ski, and I like that suggestion. Like that's one way and then maybe we.
I like using it for
A,
pay the 45,000.
like activities that you. Yeah.
Just family has a cabin, but it's,
Then we could say. So I never do five you.
well there. It's easier.
Well, that's what I said. Is because right now it's, we would pay 45.
Folks need a minute or two,
40 and keep your $3,000.
because we'll just ask you to talk about it.
But then we're gonna, then basically.
I'm saying. For example, yeah.
But we're using three, so basically we're paying for.
Keep his three, we already have this other three, so we. Yeah, however you want to look at it. I think the conversation was.
Yeah,
Like,
I
what do
agree.
you think? This is awful.
It sucks for us though.
Yeah.
I think the conversational, something, he's a good guy. It's good. So we just did some local stuff.
It's nice. Fair enough direction.
It's nice. It clears my head. It's a conversation. Yeah.
Oh, I agree, which is what I was trying to state.
I know. I agree that you said you were going to pick up the phone.
The patient. What? What's that going to patient?
I'm not impatient, I'm here to.
Oh, we're just gonna stretch a little bit.
I'm excited.
Do we go for it? So just pick your top priority, and if you have to, feel free to mention the two and if 1 minute forward out. And maybe start with Jason.
Oh, I picked regional parks as the top priority. It's, I mean, the term regional, it's equitable, it's you know, addresses kind of all areas of the city. Taking care of what we have. Community health, I felt like it kind of a lot of those categories.
Makes a lot of sense. I will collect these in at the end because of the seeds coming back. Is it Bernie? So
Yeah, so without knowing all the background on all these projects, I that green infrastructure is my top priority. It just seems aligns with a lot of our city values and serve us well in a climate time.
appreciate that. And just to be clear, often in the past, similar to some other items, we've tried to like weave it in through. It sometimes gets the first thing to get value engineered out. So by itemizing it, it can help provide that definite funding stream.
I also had green infrastructure as number one for the same reasons.
Excellent. Thanks, Chip. Any other thoughts there? What was number two? Just
Bathrooms and shelters.
bathroom. It all comes back to bathrooms, doesn't it?
Yeah, from an equity point of view and taking care of what we have.
I appreciate that.
All gotta go.
Yeah.
Elliot?
So my number one was flat irons for enhancements because it's our biggest revenue generator and we can I think we need to take care of the facility that is driving the most revenue and I think people are really enjoying that, so we can improve the quality of those systems. I think we should. And then the second was access, mobility and parking lots. We need to take care of our disabled citizens and make sure that we have enough parking for people at our facilities.
We appreciate that. So yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I think rather than Ali line some of the thoughts we've been having. And
Sorry.
we've talked about trying to find extra revenue streams. Do you want to touch base on that? Think about that.
Which part of it? There's so much to talk.
Because these are unfunded, how would we fund them down?
Well, sure. I mean, I think given the time, it's a good thing to follow up on probably. And especially we'll tie it to the rec center conversation. If that's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the things where as we recognize, we do have these funding gaps. And if it is $60 million, it might be a little bit higher. We might only be able to get an extra 20, we won't get to full 60, we'll have to prioritize these.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cliff notes is that I see a key function of my job in the next few years is we have some really critical projects that could have such a positive impact on the community and we need to figure out how to fund them. So it's my job.
Thank you, and thanks for the evening exercise. Hope that was helpful. Just next steps, I should have really passed this over to Jackson because we're leading these next steps on.
Sure. We'll come back in May with everything laid out for CIP for 2024 through 2029. This is the discussion item where we do expect it to be a little lengthier. If you have any questions and concerns that you have. And then with that, we'll come back in June with the final recommended CIP for 24 through 29. Once again, your purview as proud members is to approve the appropriations out of the Permanent Parks and Recreation Fund and recommend the CIP and budget as a whole. In September, this will go to the planning board. It is rolled up very citywide, so all city departments will have projects included. This gives a comprehensive review. Somewhere in between that timeframe, there will be staff conversations and coordination as far as the timing of projects. So something that we have in 25, maybe up to 26, if that aligns better with citywide projects. We're not going to do a park and then come back in and do all sorts of groundwork a year later. City Council does a study session in September, and then there are 2 public hearings in October to adopt the budget. And then new this year is in Q1 of next year, we'll return and talk about everything that was accomplished with the 23 CIP, and then identify what the next steps are for 24 through 29. Just so we are being a little bit more accountable and transparent about is our project timelines and budgets accurate? Do we need to make further refinements? And that will just continue to build year over year on each other.
Just thank you again for similar to the last topic for the input tonight. It's very helpful for us as we're developing this and hopefully creates a smoother landing for the plane as we get to finalizing the budget. Thank you.
Thank you all so much and welcome, Bernie and Anna. We're really glad you're here.
Your first 3-hour meeting, congratulations.
You may have time, well done.
Thanks.
Jackson, you.